There are moments in every ninja's life that split time cleanly in half, a before and an after. For most shinobi, that moment comes on a battlefield, or in the instant a blade finds its mark. But for Team 7, the moment came in a courtroom, under fluorescent light, in front of a council that had already decided their fate before a single word of testimony was spoken. If you've been with this channel for a while, you know how this story usually goes. Naruto Uzumaki claws his way up from nothing, earns his place, becomes Hokage. That's the story you know. But what if, at the one moment Team 7 needed Konoha to believe in them the most, the village turned its back instead? What if the people who saved them weren't shinobi of the leaf at all, but the last surviving elders of a clan everyone thought was extinct? Stick with me, because this is the story of how Team 7 lost everything, and found something Konoha never gave them in the first place. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because this 10-chapter arc is about to get a lot darker before it gets better. Let's begin. The Hokage's tower had never felt so much like a cage. Tsunade Senju sat behind her desk with her hands folded so tightly her knuckles had gone bloodless, staring at the 4 people standing before the assembled council. Shizen stood just behind her left shoulder, her face carefully blank in the way that meant she was screaming on the inside. Sunlight cut through the tall windows and long gold bars, falling across the floor like prison stripes. Naruto stood in the center, chin up, jaw locked. Sakura was at his left, her hands curled into fists at her sides, green medicine coat still faintly stained from 3 days ago. Sasuke stood at Naruto's right, arms crossed, dark eyes fixed on a point somewhere past the council's heads, as if refusing to grant them the satisfaction of his attention. And a half-step behind all 3 of them, Kakashi Hatake stood with his hands in his pockets, and an expression so still it might as well have been carved from stone. The facts of the matter are not in dispute, said Hamura Midokado, his voice dry as old parchment. Team 7 was assigned to escort a Kumogakure trade envoy across the border. The envoy was ambushed. 3 Kumo guards are dead. The envoy himself very nearly joined them, and the diplomatic fallout. He paused, letting the word hang in the air like a blade, threatens to undo 6 years of fragile peace between our villages. With respect, Kakashi said, his voice level, the ambush was not our failure. It was sabotage. Someone altered the escort route documents after they left this office. Someone who had access to files that only a handful of people in this village could touch. A ripple went through the council chamber. Koharu Yudatane's mouth thinned into a hard line. Careful, Hatake. That is a serious accusation to make without proof. I have proof, Kakashi said. I filed it 3 days ago. It seems to have disappeared from the record. Danzo Shimura, seated at the edge of the council dais with his cane resting against his knee and his bandaged arm folded into his robes, did not so much as blink. Grief makes men see conspiracies in shadows, he said quietly. The simplest explanation is usually the truth. Team 7 was outmatched, outmaneuvered, and 3 men are dead because of it. The Kumo delegation is demanding accountability. If we do not provide it, we risk war. Grief makes men see conspiracies in shadows. Try saying that with a straight face when you're the one holding the knife. Because here's what the council chamber didn't know, what only a few people in this entire story will ever find out. Danzo's fingerprints were all over that escort route, and he was about to bury 4 innocent shinobi to protect himself. Naruto's fists trembled at his sides. We didn't outmatch anything, he burst out. The route was wrong. The ambush was waiting for us at a checkpoint that wasn't even supposed to be on the map. Somebody set us up, Naruto. Kakashi's voice cut through, quiet but absolute. Naruto's jaw snapped shut, but his eyes were bright with fury, the kind of fury that had nowhere left to go. Sakura stepped forward instead, her voice shaking but steady. I treated the envoy myself. I stabilized him when nobody else could. I have never, not once, failed to protect a client on a mission. You cannot stand here and tell me that competence had nothing to do with why he's still breathing. No one disputes your skill, Haruno, Hamura said. We dispute your team's judgment. 3 Kumo shinobi died under your protection. That is a fact the Reikage will not simply forgive because of your bedside manner. Tsunade finally spoke, and when she did, her voice was low and dangerous. I have read every report on this incident twice. I have interviewed the surviving guards myself. There is nothing, in the evidence that supports gross negligence. What I see is 4 shinobi who walked into a trap that was laid for them before they ever left this village, and yet the trap succeeded, Danzo said softly. Whatever the cause, Hokage-sama, the outcome remains the same. 3 dead. An Anvin nearly killed. A village on the edge of holding us responsible for an act of war. The council cannot simply believe your instinct on this. We require resolution. Swift, visible resolution, or Kumogakure will assume we are shielding our own. Resolution. That word again. You'll want to remember that word, because it's going to come up more than once tonight, and every single time it does, it means the same thing: someone's life, traded for someone else's comfort. The council chamber fell into a silence so heavy you could hear the wind pressing against the windows. Tsunade's eyes swept over the 4 faces in front of her: Naruto, who she had watched grow from an orphan with no one into a boy who refused, against everything, to stop believing in people; Sakura, sharp and fierce and twice the medic Tsunade had been at her age; Sasuke, dragged back from the edge of darkness at terrible cost, still fighting every day to stay on this side of it; and Kakashi, steady, exhausted, endlessly loyal Kakashi, who had buried more of the people he loved than any man his age should have to. She was the 5th Hokage. She had sworn to protect this village. But sitting in this chair meant something else too, something crueler. Sometimes protecting the village meant sacrificing the people in it. There will be no execution, Tsunade said, and her voice did not waver, even though something in her chest felt like it was tearing loose. I will not sign a death warrant for shinobi I know to be innocent, on evidence I believe to be manufactured. But if the council insists on resolution, she made the word sound like something rotten in her mouth, then Team 7 will be exiled from Konoha, effective immediately, banished from the village and its protections. Their headbands surrendered. Their names struck from the shinobi registry. The chamber erupted. Half the council was shouting that exile was too lenient, that it set a dangerous precedent. The other half, the ones who still remembered what these 4 had done for this village, at Pain's invasion, in the war that had nearly swallowed the world, were on their feet in protest that it was far too cruel. Danzo alone did not move. He watched Tsunade with something almost like satisfaction buried behind his single visible eye, and if you had been standing close enough, you might have caught the faintest curl at the corner of his mouth. Because exile was exactly what he wanted. Exile meant Team 7 would be out of the village, out of his way, unable to keep pulling at threads that led back to him. Exile meant a clean, tidy end to a problem he himself had created. Order! Tsunade's voice cracked through the chamber like a whip, and the room fell silent. This is my judgment, and it is final. Naruto Uzumaki. Sakura Haruno. Sasuke Uchiha, you are hereby exiled from the Hidden Leaf Village, effective at sundown. You will surrender your 4 head protectors, you will leave through the main gate, and you will not return without express pardon from this council. Naruto's face had gone white. Ba-chan, that's Hokage-sama, to an exile, Hamura said coldly. Tsunade's eyes did not leave Naruto's face, and for just a moment, just one moment, something cracked in her composure, something that looked almost like an apology. I'm sorry, she said, so quietly only the 4 of them could hear it. I'm so sorry. This is the only way I can keep you alive. Naruto didn't answer. He couldn't. His throat had closed around every word he might have said. There's a particular kind of silence that follows a verdict like that. Not the silence of a room going quiet. The silence of a person's whole world going quiet, while everything around them keeps moving like nothing happened. The 4 of them walked out of the tower into the golden light of late afternoon, and Konoha carried on exactly as it always had. Merchants calling out prices, children chasing each other through the market square, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer. None of it stopped for them. None of it even noticed. This is insane, Sakura said, her voice raw. This is completely insane. We didn't do anything wrong. Kakashi-sensei filed proof and it just disappeared. How does evidence just disappear from a locked archive? It disappears, Kakashi said quietly, when the person who wants it gone has access to every locked archive in this village. Sasuke's eyes flicked toward him. You think it was Danzo. I know it was Danzo. Kakashi's voice was flat, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. I don't have proof anymore. He made sure of that. But I know. Naruto hadn't said a word since they left the tower. He walked a step behind the others, his hands shoved into his pockets, his eyes fixed on the ground like he could burn a hole through it if he looked hard enough. 6 years old, kicked out of the orphanage. 12 years old, glared at in the street by people who blamed him for a monster he never chose to carry. And now 17, standing in the wreckage of the one thing he had spent his entire life trying to earn, belonging. That's what this was always about for Naruto, wasn't it? Not power. Not even being Hokage, not really. That was just the shape his hope had taken because it was the only shape the village had ever offered him. What he actually wanted, underneath everything, was to belong somewhere. And now the village that had finally started to look at him like he was one of them, had just told him, in front of everyone, that he wasn't. If you've ever had a place you love turn around and tell you that you don't belong there anymore, you already know exactly what that silence feels like. Let me know in the comments if you've felt that before, because it's about to define everything that happens next. They reached the small apartment Naruto still called home more out of habit than anything else. 3 rooms, mismatched furniture, a fridge that hummed too loud at night. It didn't take long to pack. When you've spent your whole life ready to lose everything at a moment's notice, you learn not to accumulate much. Sakura had come along without being asked, helping fold what little Naruto owned into a worn canvas bag. Her movements sharp and efficient in the way people get when stopping to feel anything would break them. You're not doing this alone, she said, when Naruto finally looked up at her. None of us are letting you do this alone. You don't have to, Naruto started. Don't, Sakura said, and there was iron in it. Don't you dare finish that sentence. Sasuke leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching the two of them with an unreadable expression. He'd been exiled from Konoha's trust before, in every way that mattered, had spent years running from it, fighting it, trying to burn it down. And now here it was, exiling him for real, for something he hadn't even done. There was a bitter kind of irony in that, and Sasuke, more than anyone in that room, understood irony. They're not wrong to be afraid of Danzo, he said quietly. They're just too afraid to say his name out loud in that chamber. Cowards, all of them. That's Konoha for you, Naruto muttered, zipping his bag closed with more force than necessary. Everybody talks about the will of fire until the fire's pointed at somebody they don't want to look at directly. Kakashi appeared in the doorway then, his single visible eye taking in the scene, 3 teenagers packing their entire lives into bags that could each fit under an arm. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he reached up and untied his forehead protector, the metal plate with the leaf insignia catching the last of the afternoon light, and set it down on the counter next to Naruto's bag. Naruto stared at it. Sensei, I'm not letting you 3 walk out those gates without a jonin, Kakashi said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. The council exiled Team 7. I am Team 7, Sensei. Where you go, I go. They didn't exile you, Sakura said. You could stay. You could keep fighting for us from the inside, find proof, get the verdict overturned. I could, Kakashi agreed. Or I could spend the rest of my life wondering if I'd done enough, watching my students fend for themselves in a world that just told them they don't matter. He picked his forehead protector back up, folded it, and tucked it into his own bag instead of putting it back on. I made a promise a long time ago, to someone who isn't here to see whether I kept it. I don't break promises. Not even for Konoha. Nobody asked who he meant. Everybody in that room already knew. Word travels fast in a village of shinobi, and by the time the sun began sinking toward the tree line, half of Konoha seemed to have gathered, at a respectful, uncertain distance, near the main gate, not to protest. Not really to say goodbye, either, not officially. Just to watch, the way people watch a fire they can't put out. Irika Yumino stood near the front of the crowd, his face pale, his hands clenched at his sides. Hinata Hyuga stood half-hidden behind Kiba, tears streaking silently down her face, refusing to look away even though every part of her clearly wanted to. Shikamaru had his hands in his pockets and his eyes narrowed in the particular way that meant he was already 3 moves ahead, already calculating angles nobody else had thought to look for. Choji stood beside him, uncharacteristically still, uncharacteristically quiet. And near the gate itself, waiting, stood Konohamaru, 12 years old, his oversized scarf catching the evening wind, his eyes red-rimmed and furious. "This isn't right," he said, the moment Naruto came into view. "This isn't fair. You didn't do anything. Everybody knows you didn't do anything, Konohamaru." Naruto's voice was quiet, tired in a way the boy had never heard from him before. "It's okay. It's not okay. You're the one who's supposed to become Hokage. You can't be Hokage if they kick you out." Naruto crouched down slightly, meeting the boy's eyes, and for just a second, something of his old grin flickered back onto his face, worn thin, but real. "Hey. You know what I've always told you, sometimes the path gets weird. Doesn't mean it stops. I'll figure this out. I always figure it out. Promise? Promise." It was, Naruto would think much later, one of the last true things he said before everything changed. At the gate, the guards, Chunin, who clearly did not want this assignment, who kept their eyes fixed somewhere over Team 7's shoulders rather than meeting anyone's gaze directly, held out an open hand. "Forehead protectors," one of them said, voice cracking slightly. By order of the council. Sakura's hands shook as she untied hers. She had worn that headband since she was 12 years old. It had been on her forehead through the Chunin exams, through the invasion of pain, through the entire war. It felt less like removing a piece of metal and more like peeling away a layer of skin. She placed it in the guard's palm without a word. Sasuke's came off next, quiet and controlled, his expression giving nothing away, though anyone who knew him well enough would have seen the muscle working in his jaw. Naruto was last. He held his forehead protector in both hands for a long moment, thumb tracing over the leaf symbol Kakashi himself had carved a scratch through once, on the roof of the hospital, in a moment that had meant "I believe in you" more than any words could have. He looked up, past the guard, past the crowd, toward the Hokage Tower rising in the distance, its windows catching fire in the sunset. "Bachan's up there right now," he thought. "Watching this happen. Hating every second of it as much as I do." He set the headband in the guard's hand. Kakashi didn't wait to be asked. He simply took his own forehead protector back out of his bag and handed it over. The leaf symbol he'd worn since he was a child slipping out of his life as easily, and as terribly as everything else that day. The gate began to open. "Wait!" The voice cut across the crowd, sharp and commanding, and every head turned. Tsunade stood at the top of the tower steps, having come down from the council chamber at some point without any of them noticing, Shizen at her side with Taunton clutched against her chest. The Hokage descended the steps at a pace just short of running, and the crowd parted for her without needing to be told. She stopped in front of the four of them, and for a long moment, she didn't say anything at all. Then she reached into her coat and pulled out a small, sealed scroll, pressing it into Kakashi's hand. "That's everything I could gather," she said, low enough that only they could hear. "Copies of the reports before they vanished. Names of who had access to the archive that night. It's not enough to clear you, not with Danzo's people watching every move I make right now, but it's a start. Don't lose it." Kakashi tucked the scroll away carefully. "Tsunade-sama, don't," she said, and her voice broke, just slightly, just once. "Don't thank me. I let this happen. I should have found a way to stop it, and I didn't, and I am so sorry." She looked at Naruto then, and something raw passed between them, something that had nothing to do with rank or protocol. "You are not what they said you are. Any of you. Do you understand me? This village failed you today. Not the other way around." Naruto's eyes were bright and wet, and he blinked hard, refusing to let it spill over in front of everyone. "I know, Bachan. When this is fixed, and it will be fixed, I swear it on my own name, you come home. All of you. Do you hear me?" "We hear you," Sakura whispered. Tsunade straightened, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the full weight of the Hokage's authority once more, loud enough for the crowd, for the council members no doubt watching from every window of that tower. "Let it be known that this exile is a political resolution, not a judgment of guilt. The day evidence clears your names, you will be welcomed back to this village with full honors. That is my word, and I intend to keep it." It wasn't much. It wasn't nearly enough to undo what had already been done, but it was something, a thread of hope stretched thin across an impossible distance, and sometimes, a thread is all you need to hold on to. The four of them turned toward the open gate. Beyond it, the road stretched out into darkening forest, the last light of the day bleeding orange and violet across the horizon. Somewhere behind them, Konoha Maru's voice cracked out one last thing. "We'll get you back, believe it!" And a ripple of quiet, broken laughter went through the crowd, the kind that comes when people are trying not to cry. Naruto looked back once. Just once. At the village that had raised him, rejected him, embraced him, and now cast him out all over again. At the Hokage monument rising against the darkening sky, four faces carved in stone, watching over a village that hadn't quite managed to become what those faces had once dreamed it could be. Then he turned forward, and he did not look back again. "Come on," he said, and his voice, though quiet, held something steady underneath the pain, the same stubborn, unbreakable will that had carried him through every impossible thing before this one. "Let's go." The gates of Konohagakure closed behind them with a sound like a held breath finally released. They walked in silence for a long while, the darkness deepening around them, the sounds of the village fading into the ordinary hum of the forest, insects, wind through leaves, the distant call of some night bird settling in for sleep. None of them spoke, because there wasn't much left to say that hadn't already been said, and because the four of them had long since learned that some kinds of pain don't need narration. They just need company. It was Sakura who finally broke the silence, hours later, when they made camp in a small clearing off the main road. "Where do we even go?" she asked, staring into the small fire Sasuke had lit. "We can't take missions. We don't have a village. We don't have anything. We have each other," Naruto said quietly. "That's not a plan, Naruto. It's a start." He poked at the fire with a stick, watching sparks scatter up into the dark. "Kakashi-sensei, that scroll Bachan gave you, what's actually in it?" Kakashi unsealed it carefully, spreading the contents across a flat stone near the fire. Reports, names, fragments of a trail that led, infuriatingly, everywhere and nowhere at once, half-erased signatures, redacted mission logs, the ghost of a conspiracy that had covered its tracks with professional precision. "It's a start," he agreed. "Not enough. Not yet. But it's something to build on." "So we clear our names," Sasuke said. "It wasn't a question. We find whoever's actually behind this, and we make them answer for it." "And in the meantime?" Sakura asked. "We can't just wander around the elemental nations with no headbands and no village. Every bounty hunter, every rival village, every grudge anyone's ever held against any of us, we're exposed. Completely exposed." Nobody had an answer for that. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the dark, an owl called out, low and mournful. Naruto glanced down at his stomach, where, beneath cloth and skin, an ancient seal held something enormous and dangerous and, in its own strange way, his. He thought about his mother, a woman he had only ever known through fragments, a name whispered by strangers, a chakra chain glimpsed once in a memory that wasn't quite his own, a red-haired figure in the few photographs that had survived. Kushina Uzumaki. The last of a clan that had been all but wiped from the map generations ago, its village destroyed, its people scattered or killed. Uzumaki. He'd never really thought much about what that name meant, beyond being the one thing that had always, stubbornly, been his. "We keep moving," Kakashi said finally, rolling the scroll back up and tucking it away. "We stay off the main roads where we can. We look for allies, or at least neutral ground, somewhere Konoha's political reach can't easily follow. And we don't stop looking for proof. That's the plan for now. It's not much, but it's what we've got." Naruto nodded slowly, and for the first time since the verdict, something like resolve settled into his shoulders, straightening his spine, steadying his hands. "Then that's what we do," he said. "We survive, we find the truth. And we go home." They set watches through the night, Kakashi first, then Sasuke, then Sakura, each of them taking their turns staring out into a darkness that felt, for the first time in any of their lives, genuinely unfamiliar. No village lights on the horizon. No safety net beneath them. Just the four of them, and whatever lay ahead. It was 2 days later, deep into unfamiliar territory, following a route Kakashi chose specifically because it avoided every major road and every village checkpoint, that they first felt it. They were crossing a stretch of coastline none of them recognized. Jagged cliffs, salt-heavy wind, the ocean churning gray and restless far below. The land here felt old in a way that was hard to explain, heavy with something that pressed against the edges of perception like a held breath. Ruined stonework jutted out of overgrown hillsides at odd intervals. The remains of walls, of towers, of something that had clearly once been vast and was now nothing but bones. "Where are we?" Sakura asked, pulling her coat tighter against the wind. Kakashi consulted the map, frowning. "According to this, we're at the edge of what used to be the land of whirlpools." Sasuke went still. Uzumaki. Naruto's head came up sharply. "The Whirlpool Village?" "My mom's, her homeland," Kakashi confirmed quietly. "Destroyed decades ago, in the years before the Second Shinobi World War. 3 villages allied against it, out of fear of the Uzumaki clan's Fuinjutsu mastery. What survivors there were scattered across the elemental nations. Most eventually settled in Konoha, which is part of why our villages have always shared such close ties." Naruto stared out at the ruins scattered across the hillside, something tightening in his chest that he couldn't quite name. His mother had walked this ground once, had grown up somewhere near here, in a village that no longer existed, surrounded by a clan that had been reduced, over the following decades, to a scattering of names and old records and a handful of surviving bloodlines. "My mom's home," he thought. "This is where she was born." And then, without warning, the seal on his stomach, the one that had sat quiet and familiar his entire life, the one that held the nine tails bound tight beneath layers of his father's and mother's combined Fuinjutsu, flared. Not painfully. Not dangerously, but unmistakably, a warm pulse of chakra that spread out from his core like ripples on water, responding to something in the land itself, something that recognized him even if he had never set foot here before in his life. "Naruto?" Sakura's voice sharpened with concern as he stopped dead in his tracks, one hand pressed to his stomach. "What's wrong?" "I don't." He looked down. Beneath his shirt, faint and golden, the edges of the seal were glowing, not the malevolent orange-red of the Nine Tails chakra bleeding through in anger, but something softer, something that felt, impossibly, almost gentle. Like a hand reaching out across a distance no one should have been able to cross. "It's never done that before." Kakashi's visible eye narrowed, scanning the treeline, the ruins, the horizon. Years of instinct honed through a life of war were screaming at him that something was watching them, not with hostility, not exactly, but with the sharp, careful attention of something ancient deciding whether 4 strangers deserved to be noticed at all. "Sasuke," he said quietly. "Sharingan." Now, Sasuke's eyes were already bleeding red, the tomos spinning into focus as he scanned the ruined hillside around them. For a long moment, there was nothing. Wind. Waves. The distant cry of gulls. Then his whole body went rigid. "We're surrounded." The words had barely left his mouth when the air itself seemed to fold, chakra signatures blooming into visibility all around the clearing, seals half hidden in the grass and stonework flaring to life in patterns none of them had ever seen before, spiraling lines of gold light rising up out of the ruined earth like something ancient waking from a very long sleep. "Stand together!" Kakashi barked, already moving, kunai in hand, placing himself between his students and whatever was about to happen. Sakura's hands crackled with medical chakra, ready. Sasuke's Sharingan spun, tracking every flicker of movement at the tree line. Naruto's own chakra surged up instinctively to meet whatever was coming, gold light answering gold light, the seal on his stomach blazing brighter with every second. Shapes began to emerge from the ruins, not the root operatives Kakashi had half feared, not bandits, not rival shinobi from some hostile village. Figures in long, weathered robes, their faces marked with faded spiral tattoos, moving with the eerie precision of people who had guarded this land for generations without ever being seen doing it. At their center walked a woman, elderly but unbent, her white hair bound back severely, her eyes fixed, not on Kakashi, not on Sasuke or Sakura, but directly, unerringly, on Naruto. "That chakra," the woman said, and her voice carried across the clearing with an authority that made even Kakashi's hackles rise. "That signature. I have not felt it since the day Uzumaki fell." Naruto's breath caught in his throat. "You know about my mom?" The woman's eyes, pale, sharp, unmistakably ancient in a way that had nothing to do with the lines on her face, studied him for a long, silent moment. "Kushina's boy," she said finally, and something in her voice cracked, just slightly, the first hint of emotion beneath decades of hardened composure. "We thought the line had ended. We thought we were the last." Behind her, the robed figures shifted, dozens of them now visible along the ruined hillside, chakra humming in the seals worked into the very stones beneath their feet. A hidden clan, hidden for decades, protecting a secret Konoha itself had never known existed. And that's where we're going to leave it for today. For exiled shinobi, cast out by the only home any of them had ever known, standing at the edge of a ruined village that shouldn't exist, face to face with a clan the world had long since given up for dead. Who are these people? What do they want with Naruto? And what happens when the Uzumaki elders decide whether Team 7 deserves to learn the secrets their clan has spent generations protecting? Last time, we left Team 7 surrounded, exiled shinobi with nowhere left to call home, standing in the ruins of a village that wasn't supposed to exist anymore, staring down a woman who spoke Kushina Uzumaki's name like it was a wound that had never quite closed. If you're just joining us, go back and catch Chapter 1 first, because this next part is not going to slow down to explain itself. Because here's the thing about secrets that survive for decades. The people who keep them don't stay soft. And Team 7 was about to find out exactly how sharp a clan can get, when it spends 30 years hiding from a world that already tried to erase it once. Let's get into it. For a long moment, nobody moved. The wind off the ocean cut cold and sharp across the ruined hillside, carrying salt and the faint mineral smell of old, weathered stone. Dozens of robed figures ringed the clearing, chakra humming low and steady beneath their feet, spiral seals glowing faint gold in the long grass like something the earth itself had been keeping in reserve. At the center of it all, the white-haired woman who had spoken Kushina's name stood perfectly still, her pale eyes fixed on Naruto with an intensity that made the hair on the back of his neck rise. Kakashi's kunai never wavered. "We're not here to cause trouble," he said, his voice even, deliberately calm, the voice of a man who had talked his way out of worse standoffs than this one. "We're travelers. We didn't know this land was occupied." "Nothing in the land of whirlpools is unoccupied, Hataki Kakashi," the woman said, and the way she said his name, full, precise, like she'd known it long before this moment, sent a fresh ripple of unease through all four of them. "You simply weren't meant to notice." "You know who we are," Sasuke said. It wasn't a question. "I know a Sharingan when I see one active in my territory," she replied evenly. "I know a copy ninja's reputation. And I know," her gaze slid back to Naruto, softening by some small, almost imperceptible degree, "the chakra of a woman I have not felt in this world for 17 years. Naruto's hands were shaking, and it had nothing to do with fear. "You knew my mom," he said. "You actually knew her. Not just stories. You knew her. I watched her grow from a child no taller than your knee into the strongest kunoichi this clan ever produced," the woman said. "Before Konoha took her in. Before she became someone else's legacy instead of ours." There was an edge under those words, old, worn smooth by decades but still sharp enough to cut, and Kakashi heard it clearly. Someone else's legacy. Whatever bridge existed between this hidden clan and Konoha, it wasn't a friendly one. Not entirely. "My name is Tsukiko," the woman said finally, straightening, and something in her bearing shifted, less predator sizing up prey, more a leader deciding how much of her hand to show. "I am the eldest of what remains of the Uzumaki clan outside the walls of your village. And you," she took a slow step forward, close enough now that Naruto could see the faint spiral tattoo inked at the corner of her jaw, half hidden beneath the collar of her robe, "are Kushina's son. There is no mistaking that chakra. I would know it anywhere." "Naruto," he said before he could stop himself. "Naruto Uzumaki." Something flickered across Tsukiko's face. Grief, maybe, or recognition, or both at once, tangled together too tightly to separate. "Uzumaki," she repeated softly, testing the word like she hadn't said it out loud, applied to a living person, in a very long time. "Yes. Of course it is." Kakashi lowered his kunai, though not all the way, and not without a warning glance to the robed figures still ringing the clearing. "You have the advantage here," he said. "You know who we are. We know almost nothing about you," beyond the fact that a clan the entire shinobi world believes was scattered to extinction 30 years ago is apparently alive, organized, and guarding a piece of land nobody's supposed to remember exists. That is by design, Tsukiko said simply. So what happens now? Sakura asked. Her voice was steady, but her hand hadn't left the kunai pouch at her hip. You're not going to just let us walk away, knowing what we know. For the first time, Tsukiko's expression cracked into something almost like amusement, thin, brief, gone as quickly as it appeared. No, she agreed. I am not. The robed figures around the clearing shifted, and Kakashi's body tends to move, to put himself between whatever came next and his students. But Tsukiko raised one hand, and the movement stilled instantly, obedient in a way that spoke of absolute authority earned over decades, not merely demanded. You will come with us, she said. Not as prisoners, though I will not pretend you have much choice in the matter. You will surrender your weapons for the duration of the walk. You will be blindfolded, and when we arrive, the clan will decide together what is to be done with 4 exiled shinobi who have wandered, by whatever strange thread of fate, directly into what remains of Yuzushiogakure. And if we refuse? Sasuke asked, his voice flat, testing. Tsukiko's pale eyes moved to him, unreadable. Then you will find that a clan built entirely on the art of sealing is not an easy one to fight your way out of. I would not recommend testing that theory, Uchiha. Not on the ground you currently stand on. Kakashi glanced at his students, at Naruto's face, torn between fear and something that looked dangerously close to hope, at Sakura's tightly controlled composure, at Sasuke's calculating stillness, and made the decision the way he made 100 decisions before, weighing the odds and choosing the path least likely to get his team killed. We'll come, he said. Weapons surrendered. No tricks. Sensei, Naruto started. No tricks, Kakashi repeated, firmer this time, and something in his tone made it clear this wasn't a discussion. He looked back at Tsukiko. But if anything happens to my students, I promise you, hidden clan or not, you will regret it. Tsukiko studied him for a long moment, something almost like respect passing behind her pale eyes. A loyal sensei, she said. That, at least, I can understand. She turned, robes sweeping against the tall grass. Bring them. Being blindfolded and led through unfamiliar terrain by strangers who could kill you at any moment is, it turns out, exactly as unpleasant as it sounds. They walked for what felt like hours, though Kakashi, tracking the turns, the changes in ground texture beneath his sandals, the shift from open coastline to what felt like descending, narrowing passages, estimated it was closer to 90 minutes. The air changed as they went, the salt-heavy wind giving way to something cooler, stiller, tinged faintly with the mineral smell of deep stone, and underneath it, something warmer, wood smoke, and the green, living smell of things growing somewhere close. Naruto walked with one hand resting lightly against Sakura's shoulder, guided forward step by one of the robed escorts, his other senses straining to make sense of a world he couldn't see. He could feel it before he could name it, a hum in the air, low and constant, like standing near a hive of something vast and half asleep. Chakra. Everywhere, woven into the very ground beneath his feet in patterns too complex for him to follow, seals layered on seals layered on seals, an architecture of protection so old, and so total that it felt less like walking through a hidden village and more like walking through the inside of a living seal itself. You feel that? He murmured to Sakura, barely above a whisper. I feel it, she murmured back. It's incredible. It's like nothing I've ever felt before. Whatever this place is, it's alive with seals. Somewhere ahead of them, Tsukiko's voice carried back, dry with something that might have been humor. You have sharp senses for a blindfolded girl, Harino Sakura. Good. You will need them, if the clan decides to let you stay, if. That word settled into all of them differently. Naruto felt it like a stone dropped into his chest. Sakura felt it as a challenge, something to be met and answered. Sasuke felt it, walking silent and tense at the rear of the group, as one more door in his life that might close before he even got the chance to see what was behind it. Finally, after a long descent down what felt like a series of natural stone steps, the ground leveled out, and the air changed again, warmer now, brighter somehow, though the blindfolds kept them from confirming it with their eyes. Voices drifted toward them, dozens of them, low murmurs of an actual, functioning community going about its evening, footsteps on packed earth, the clatter of pottery, a child's laughter cut short by a hushed adult voice, the crackle of cooking fires. Remove the blindfolds, Tsukiko said. Hands worked at the cloth behind Naruto's head, and then light flooded back in, and for a moment he could only blink, disoriented, as the world resolved itself around him. It was breathtaking. There is no other word for it, and if you could see what Team 7 saw in that moment, you'd understand exactly why every single one of them stopped in their tracks. They stood in a vast, hidden basin, cupped between towering cliff walls that curved inward overhead like the lip of some enormous stone bowl, leaving only a narrow strip of open sky visible far above, enough to let daylight and rain through, not enough to be spotted by anything flying overhead unless they knew exactly where to look. Within that basin, a settlement had been built with a kind of patient, careful artistry that spoke of decades, not years. Homes constructed from pale stone and dark timber, their rooftops curved in the distinctive spiral motif of the old Uzumaki crest, connected by raised wooden walkways strung between them like the threads of some enormous web. Everywhere, on doorframes, on rooftops, worked into the very stones of the walkways underfoot, seals glowed faintly gold in the deepening evening light, an entire village humming with fuin jutsu the way Konoha hummed with the everyday bustle of ordinary life. At the center of it all rose a single great structure, taller than the rest, its curved roof crowned with an enormous spiral standard that caught the last light of the sun like a beacon. Uzumaki, Kakashi breathed, and for once in his life, he sounded genuinely, completely stunned. This is Uzumaki. It's still here. It survived. A fragment of it, Tsukiko said, and there was something proud and something sorrowful in her voice at once, tangled together the way only decades of grief and defiance can tangle. What you see was not spared by mercy. It was rebuilt, stone by stone, seal by seal, by those of us who refused to let this clan vanish entirely from the earth. The world believes Uzumaki fell 30 years ago and stayed fallen. We have spent every one of those years making certain the world continues to believe that. Naruto turned in a slow circle, taking it all in, the spiral rooftops, the glowing seals, the men and women moving between homes on the raised walkways overhead, their robes the same faded, weathered style as Tsukiko's own, spiral tattoos marking faces young and old alike. His mother had grown up somewhere like this. Maybe exactly this. His chest ached with an emotion he didn't have a name for, not quite grief, not quite joy, something that lived in the space between the two. There are so many of you, Sakura said softly, staring up at the walkways, where dozens of curious faces had gathered to look down at the newcomers. I thought, everyone always said the Uzumaki clan was basically gone. That there were only a handful of survivors left anywhere. That is precisely what we needed the world to believe, said a new voice. A man stepped forward from the crowd gathering near the base of the great central structure, tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair streaked with gray, a heavy leather satchel of scroll cases slung across his back that clinked softly with every movement. His eyes, when they settled on Naruto, went wide with something like shock. Renji, Tsukiko said by way of introduction. Our seal master. He will have opinions about all of this, I promise you, and he will share them whether or not anyone asks. That chakra, Renji murmured, ignoring the jab entirely, his gaze fixed on Naruto with an intensity that made Naruto shift uncomfortably under it. Tsukiko-sama is this. Kushina's son, Tsukiko confirmed. Yes. Renji's expression did something complicated, surprise, then wonder, then a kind of careful, guarded hope, all crossing his weathered face in the space of a few seconds. Then the line isn't broken after all, he said, half to himself. After everything, after all of it, the line survived. The line survived within Konoha's walls, Tsukiko said, and there was that edge again, sharp beneath the words. Whether it survives here, among us, is a question still to be answered. A third figure joined them then, younger than Renji, though not by much, a woman with close-cropped dark hair and forearms wrapped in protective bracers etched with faintly glowing sealwork, her stride purposeful and watchful in the way of someone who had spent a lifetime as this village's first line of defense. Isamu wants to know if we're feeding the strangers or interrogating them first, she said dryly, addressing Tsukiko directly. He says either way he'd like advance warning so he can put the kettle on. Where is Isamu? Tsukiko asked. overseeing the perimeter reinforcement. He'll join us before the council convenes. The woman's dark eyes swept over Team 7 with frank, unhurried assessment, lingering longest, curiously, on Sasuke's still active Sharingan, which he hadn't yet bothered to deactivate. Sharingan, she noted. Interesting. We haven't had one of those anywhere near this village in a very long time. Not since the war. Deactivate it, Kakashi murmured to Sasuke, low enough that only his student would hear. Sasuke's eyes bled back to black without argument, though the tension in his shoulders didn't ease. Tsukiko nodded once, decisively, the gesture of a leader who had made up her mind about the immediate next steps, if not yet the larger question hanging over all of them. Bring them to the meeting hall, she said. Food first. Then we talk. A clan does not interrogate guests on an empty stomach, whatever else might be true about them. The meeting hall, when they were led inside it, turned out to be the great central structure they'd glimpsed on arrival. A wide, high-ceilinged space built around a sunken central hearth, its walls lined with shelves of scroll cases stretching up into shadow, its floor worked through with an enormous spiral seal so vast it took up the entire room, glowing faintly beneath a layer of polished stone. Long low tables had been arranged near the hearth, and within minutes, villagers moved among them with quiet efficiency, setting down bowls of rice, grilled fish caught fresh from the coastal waters below the cliffs, simmered vegetables fragrant with ginger and sesame, and cups of hot green tea that steamed gently in the cool evening air. Naruto stared at the food for a long moment before he registered how hungry he actually was. 3 days on the road with nothing but ration bars and whatever they could forage had left all 4 of them running on fumes. He ate carefully at first, watching Tsukiko across the low table, half expecting some kind of trick. But the food was just food, warm, simple, and better than anything he'd eaten since leaving Konoha, and eventually hunger won out over suspicion, and he ate like the exhausted 17-year-old he actually was. Better? Tsukiko asked, watching him with an expression that had softened considerably since the confrontation on the hillside. Yeah, Naruto admitted, a little sheepish. Sorry. It's been a rough couple days. So I gathered, Tsukiko said. A courtroom verdict. An exile. 4 shinobi cast out of the only home they've known, stumbling by pure chance onto the one place in the elemental nations that might actually understand what that feels like. She set down her tea, her expression turning grave. Tell me what happened. All of it, from the beginning. So they told her, Kakashi doing most of the talking, precise and measured, laying out the sabotaged mission, the manufactured evidence, Danzo's quiet manipulation of the council, Tsunade's impossible choice between exile and execution. Sakura filled in details of the wounded envoy, the medical facts that didn't add up to negligence no matter how the council spun them. Sasuke spoke little, but when he did, his words carried the flat certainty of someone who had learned, the hard way, to recognize when Konoha's institutions were protecting themselves rather than the truth. Tsukiko listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable, occasionally exchanging a glance with Renji, who had settled at the table beside her partway through the story, scroll satchel set aside for the moment, listening with the focused attention of a man cataloging every detail. When they finished, silence stretched across the hall, broken only by the soft crackle of the hearth fire. Danzo, Tsukiko said finally, and the name came out of her mouth like something bitter she needed to spit out. Yes. I know that name. This clan has reason to know that name. Naruto's head came up sharply. You know Danzo? We know of him, Renji said grimly. His shadow has crossed this region before, quietly, the way it always moves. There have been disappearances near our territory over the years, Uzumaki descendants who wandered too close to Konoha's reach and were never heard from again. We assumed it was coincidence for a long time. We stopped assuming that a long time ago. Kakashi's expression darkened. You're saying Danzo has been targeting Uzumaki survivors. I am saying, Tsukiko said carefully, that a man who built his career on the doctrine that anything can be sacrificed for the village's strength has always had a particular fascination with bloodlines he does, not personally control. The Uzumaki clan's Fuinjutsu mastery was legendary once. Legendary enough that 3 villages allied to destroy Uzushiogakure rather than let that mastery grow unchecked in a single place. Her jaw tightened. Konoha was not among the villages that struck the final blow. But Konoha benefited enormously from what remained afterward, from the survivors who fled to its walls, from the alliance sealed in blood between the Senju and Uzumaki clans generations ago, from every scrap of sealing knowledge those refugees carried with them. Your village built no small part of its strength on the bones of mine, Hatake Kakashi. Do not mistake the warmth in this hall tonight for forgiveness of that fact. The words landed heavy in the room. Naruto shifted uncomfortably, torn between loyalty to the village that had raised him and the aching, undeniable pull of finally sitting among people who shared his mother's blood, his mother's chakra, his mother's name. I didn't know any of that, he admitted quietly. Nobody ever told me. Nobody told me anything about the Uzumaki, really. I always thought I was the last one. The only one left anywhere. Something in Tsukiko's expression cracked open at that, grief showing plainly for just a moment before she smoothed it back beneath decades of practiced composure. You were not the only one, she said. You were simply the one we could not reach. Kushina left this village as a small girl, sent to Konoha as part of an old alliance agreement, long before Yuzushiogakure fell. By the time the village burned, she was already half a world away, already becoming someone Konoha's shinobi, not ours. We heard, years later, that she had married, that she had a son. We had no way to find you. No way to know if you had even survived the day the Ninetales was unleashed on your village. That day is not exactly a secret, even out here. Naruto's stomach turned cold. You knew about that? About what happened the night I was born? We know a great deal more than the rest of the world assumes, Renji said quietly. Fuinjutsu of that scale leaves traces, if you know how to look for them. We felt the seal placed on you the night it happened, faint as a whisper carried across an ocean. We did not know whose child bore it. We only knew that somewhere, an Uzumaki seal of extraordinary complexity had been woven into a newborn's body, and that whoever cast it had paid a price for the privilege. The room went very quiet. Naruto's hands had curled into fists on his knees, his throat tight. Sakura reached over without a word and rested her hand against his shoulder, steady and grounding. My parents died sealing the Ninetales inside me, Naruto said, his voice rough. I know that now. I didn't always. But I know it now. Then you understand, Tsukiko said gently, why this clan does not take lightly the arrival, on our doorstep, of Kushina Uzumaki's only son, exiled, hunted, and carrying inside him a piece of history this clan has spent 30 years trying to protect from a world that has never stopped wanting to use us. The conversation stretched on long into the evening, questions about Konoha's current political landscape, about Danzo's root organization, about the state of the shinobi world since the war's end. Tsukiko and Renji absorbing every detail with the hungry attention of people who had deliberately cut themselves off from the wider world and were only now, cautiously, considering reconnecting to it. It was well past dark when a new figure finally pushed through the hall's heavy wooden doors, a broad-shouldered man in his middle years, his forearms bare and marked from wrist to elbow with intricate spiraling scars that seemed, in the firelight, to shift and shimmer faintly with contained chakra. He crossed the room without ceremony, dropping into a seat beside Renji with the easy familiarity of long friendship. Isamu, Tsukiko said by way of introduction. Our chain master. He has been waiting rather impatiently to meet you, Naruto Uzumaki. Isamu's dark eyes fixed on Naruto with an intensity that made him sit up straighter. You carry your mother's blood, he said, without preamble, his voice low and rough. I can feel it from here. The chain affinity, it's rare, even among Uzumaki. Kushina had it in full measure. I trained beside her, when we were both young enough to think that mattered more than survival. He paused. Do you know what the Adamantine Sealing Chains are, boy? Naruto blinked. I've heard the name. I think I saw them once. In a memory, or a vision, or something. When Kurama and he stopped, uncertain how much of that story was his to tell in a room he'd only just entered. Isamu's expression sharpened with unmistakable interest. You have already manifested them, even partially? Untrained, uninstructed, and you have already touched that technique? He looked at Tsukiko, something urgent in his face. Tsukiko-sama, this changes things. I am aware, Tsukiko said, though her tone remained carefully neutral. It is precisely why this matter cannot be decided over dinner. It requires the full council. Naruto's stomach tightened. The full council. That's the thing that decides whether we stay, right? Whether you help us, or throw us back out there to fend for ourselves? Tsukiko's pale eyes met his, and for a moment, something almost tender passed behind them. The look of a woman staring, however briefly, at the ghost of a girl she had raised and lost decades ago, reflected now in her son's face. It decides more than that, she said quietly. It decides whether this clan is willing to risk everything it has spent 30 years protecting, for the sake of 4 exiled shinobi who arrived on our doorstep by chance rather than by choice. It decides whether the last hidden fragment of Uzumaki opens its gates to the outside world for the first time since it fell, or whether we send you back out into that world tonight, with nothing more than the food in your stomachs and whatever mercy the road shows you. The warmth of the hall suddenly felt a great deal colder. And if the council says no? Sasuke asked, his voice flat, testing the boundaries of the question the way he tested the boundaries of everything. Then you will leave the way you came, Tsukiko said simply. Blindfolded. Escorted to the border, and this village will disappear from your memory of the world as thoroughly as it has disappeared from everyone else's, for your own safety and for ours. I would not wish that outcome, but I will not pretend it is not a possibility. Naruto's jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists against his knees. 17 years old, and he had already been exiled once this week, cast out of the only home he'd ever known by a council that had decided, coldly and politically, that his life was worth less than their convenience. The thought of standing in front of another council, waiting for another verdict that could go either way, made something old and exhausted rise up in his chest. But underneath the exhaustion, something else stirred too. The same stubborn refusal to give up that had carried him through every impossible thing before this one. Then we'll convince them, he said, and his voice, though tired, carried real steel underneath it. Whatever it takes. We're not going anywhere without at least trying. Something flickered across Tsukiko's face. Approval, maybe, or the faint, painful echo of recognizing Kushina's own stubborn will in her son's determined jaw. That, she said softly, is very much your mother's answer. Isamu leaned back, arms crossed, studying all 4 of them with new, sharper interest. The council convenes at dawn, he said. I would suggest all of you sleep while you can. Whatever happens tomorrow, you are going to need your strength for it. They were shown to a small guest house near the edge of the settlement, modest, but warm, with sleeping mats already laid out and a low fire crackling in a stone hearth. The door had barely closed behind them before Sakura sank down onto one of the mats, exhaling a long, shaky breath she'd clearly been holding since the moment they walked into the ruins. This is insane, she said quietly. I mean, Naruto, this is genuinely, completely insane. There's an entire hidden village here. An entire clan Konoha thinks is basically extinct. And they knew your mother. Yeah, Naruto said, staring at his hands, at the faint shape of the seal beneath his shirt that had reacted so strongly to this ground, this place, this blood. Yeah, I don't even know how to process all of it, honestly. Sasuke leaned against the wall near the door, arms crossed, his dark eyes distant, turned inward on something none of them could quite see. A hidden clan with few ninjutsu mastery advanced enough to build and maintain an entire concealed settlement for 30 years without Konoha ever noticing, he said slowly. And apparently, a personal grudge against Danzo that predates our exile entirely. You think that's relevant? Kakashi asked, watching his student carefully. I think, Sasuke said, that we walked out of one conspiracy and directly into the edges of another. And I think tomorrow's council isn't just going to decide whether we get to stay here. I think it's going to decide whether this clan finally does something about 30 years of grievances it's been sitting on. Kakashi was quiet for a long moment, turning that over, weighing it against everything Tsukiko and Renji and Isamu had said tonight, against the sharp, careful watchfulness in every villager's eyes, against a hidden village built entirely around the principle of never, ever being found. Maybe, he said finally. Or maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe they're just trying to decide if 4 strangers can be trusted with a secret this large. Either way, Naruto said quietly, lying back on his mat, staring up at the timbered ceiling above him, we don't have a choice. We need them. We need whatever they can teach us, if we're ever going to prove what really happened back in Konoha. And I think, he hesitated, something raw and hopeful creeping into his voice, I think I need this, too, not just the training. This. Being somewhere that actually feels like it might have a piece of my mom left in it. Nobody had an answer for that. The fire crackled low in the hearth. Outside, faint and distant, the sound of the hidden village settling into its evening rhythms drifted through the walls, voices, footsteps on wooden walkways, the low hum of chakra worked into every seal and stone of a place that had survived, against every possible odd, for 30 secret years. Sleep, when it finally came, was restless for all of them. And it was somewhere in the deepest, quietest hour of that restless night that Naruto woke with a start, the seal on his stomach pulsing warm and gold beneath his shirt, and found himself staring at a faint, translucent shape standing at the foot of his sleeping mat. A woman with wild red hair and eyes exactly like his own, watching him with an expression of aching, impossible tenderness. Before the vision dissolved like mist and left him alone in the dark, his heart pounding, utterly certain of who, he had just seen. Naruto didn't sleep again after the vision. He lay on his back on the thin sleeping mat, staring up at the dark timber ceiling, replaying it over and over, the wild red hair, the eyes that were unmistakably, achingly his own, the expression on her face that had held so much love it felt like it might crack something open in his chest just to remember it. He hadn't dreamed of his mother before. Not really. Not like that. He'd seen her once, briefly, in the depths of his own mind, in the moment he and Kurama had finally understood each other, but that had felt distant, filtered through memory and chakra and things he didn't fully understand. This had felt like she was there. By the time gray light began seeping through the cracks around the guest house's shuttered window, he'd given up on rest entirely and sat up, pulling his knees to his chest, staring at nothing. Across the room, Sasuke was already awake too. He always woke early, some old habit from years of sleeping with one eye open, sharpening a kunai against the whetstone with slow, methodical strokes that had more to do with keeping his hands busy than any actual need for a sharper blade. You didn't sleep, Sasuke said. Not a question. Neither did you. I don't need much. Naruto huffed something that wasn't quite a laugh. Yeah. I noticed. Ever since, he stopped himself before finishing that sentence, because ever since Itachi wasn't really his to bring up, not at 5 in the morning, not before whatever was about to happen at dawn. Sasuke's jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't push back, just kept sharpening the blade with the same unhurried rhythm. I saw her, Naruto said instead, quieter. Last night. My mom. She was just standing there, looking at me. Sasuke's hands stilled. A dream? I don't know. It didn't feel like a dream. Naruto pressed the heel of his palm against his eyes, exhaling hard. It felt real, Sasuke. Like she was actually there. Like this place, this land, is doing something to me that I don't understand yet. This entire village is built on fuinjutsu most of the world forgot existed, Sasuke said. I wouldn't rule anything out. He set the whetstone aside, sheathing the kunai with a soft click. Ask the elders? If anyone would know what that seal on your stomach is capable of on ground like this, it's them. By the time Kakashi and Sakura stirred awake, Sakura first, alert instantly the way medics learn to be, checking automatically for injuries out of pure habit before she even fully opened her eyes. The sky outside had brightened to the pale gray gold of early morning, and a soft knock sounded at the guest house door. It was the dark-haired woman from the night before, the one who'd asked, dryly, whether Isamu wanted to feed the strangers or interrogate them. Up close, in the morning light, Naruto could see she was younger than he'd first guessed, maybe not much older than Kakashi. Her forearm bracers etched with the same faint spiral seal work he noticed on half the villagers so far. Keyed, she introduced herself briskly. I'll be escorting you to the council hall. Eat quickly if you haven't already. Tsukiko-sama doesn't like to be kept waiting, and neither, frankly, do I. They ate a hurried breakfast of rice and pickled vegetables, tea steaming in simple clay cups, none of them saying much. There wasn't much left to say that hadn't already been said the night before. Whatever was coming, they'd face it the way they'd faced everything else, together, and with whatever nerve they had left. The council hall, in daylight, was even more striking than it had been by firelight the evening before. Sunlight filtered down through the narrow gap in the cliffs high overhead, falling in long, hazy shafts across the vast spiral seal worked into the stone floor, and the shelves of scroll cases lining the walls seemed to stretch up forever into shadow. Decades, maybe centuries, of accumulated Uzumaki knowledge preserved against a war that had tried to erase all of it. But it was the council itself that stole Naruto's attention the moment they stepped through the doors. Where the night before had been an informal gathering, Tsukiko, Rinji, and Isamu around a dinner table, this morning the hall had transformed into something far more formal, far more imposing. A raised dais had been arranged at the far end of the room, and seated upon it, in a long curved arc, sat what could only be described as the clan's ruling body, perhaps 15 elders, men and women both, their ages ranging from what looked like early middle years to genuinely ancient, all wearing the same weathered spiral-marked robes, all watching the four newcomers approach with expressions ranging from open curiosity to undisguised suspicion. Tsukiko sat at the dais's center, Rinji and Isamu flanking her on either side. But it was the elders on the far edges of the arc who drew Naruto's eye first. An old man with a deeply lined face and a single clouded eye, leaning on a gnarled wooden staff carved with spiraling script, and a stern-faced woman with iron-gray hair pulled back so severely it looked painful, her arms crossed tight over a chest marked, visible at the collar, with old scarring that spoke of battles survived rather than simply endured. Team 7, Tsukiko said, her voice carrying easily across the hall despite its size. Approach. They walked forward together, stopping at a respectful distance from the dais, and Naruto felt, for the first time since the courtroom back in Konoha, the specific, familiar weight of being judged, of standing in front of people who held his fate in their hands and had not yet decided which way to tip the scale. Let it be recorded, Tsukiko said formally, and beside her, a younger woman, a scribe, Naruto realized, seated at a low table with brush and scroll already prepared, began writing in swift, practiced strokes. On this morning, the full council of what remains of the Uzumaki clan convenes to determine the fate of 4 shinobi exiled from Konoha: Hatake Kakashi, Hirono Sakura, Uchiha Sasuke, and, her voice caught, almost imperceptibly, before steadying, Uzumaki Naruto, son of Kushina. A murmur rippled through the assembled elders at that final name, and Naruto felt every eye on the dais shift more intently onto him. The old man with the clouded eye leaned forward, his staff tapping once against the stone floor. Uzumaki, he repeated, his voice a dry rasp. That name has not been claimed by an outsider in this hall in 30 years. Prove it, boy. Show us what you carry. Naruto glanced at Kakashi, who gave the faintest nod of permission, and then at Isamu, who watched him with an expression that was equal parts encouragement and evaluation. Slowly, Naruto reached down and pulled up the edge of his shirt, revealing the intricate black lines of the seal spiraling across his stomach. The reaction in the hall was immediate and visceral. Several elders leaned forward as one. The stern-faced woman's crossed arms dropped to her sides. Even the old man with the staff drew a sharp breath. The 8 trigram seal, Rinji murmured, though clearly not for the benefit of anyone who didn't already recognize it. Minato Namake's design, if the historical records are accurate. But the foundation beneath it. He leaned forward, studying the pattern with the intensity of a scholar seeing a rare manuscript for the first time. That lattice work is unmistakably Uzumaki, Kushina's own hand, unless I'm very much mistaken. You are not mistaken, Tsukiko said quietly. I would know my own clan's Fuinjutsu anywhere, even woven into a design not entirely our own. The stern-faced woman spoke for the first time, her voice sharp and clipped. A seal proves lineage. It does not prove intent. Konoha has used Uzumaki blood as a tool before, married into it, bred from it, and discarded what remained when it was no longer useful. How do we know this is not simply the next chapter of that same story? An Uzumaki heir, sent to us wrapped in a sympathetic tale of exile, to worm his way into our secrets. The accusation landed like a slap. Naruto's face flushed hot, and beside him he felt Sakura stiffen, ready to argue, and Kakashi's hand settled lightly on her shoulder. Not yet, Elder Maki, Tsukiko said, a warning note in her voice. I am not accusing the boy of malice, Tsukiko-sama, the woman, Maki, said evenly. I am asking the council to consider it as a possibility, because we did not survive 30 years of hiding by assuming the best of every convenient story that wandered onto our doorstep. her sharp eyes fixed on Naruto directly. Tell me, boy. If we refuse you, if we send you back out into that forest today, with nothing, what will you do? Naruto's jaw tightened, and for a moment, the old fire that had carried him through every impossible fight of his life rose up hot in his chest. We'll survive, he said, his voice steady despite the anger simmering underneath it. Same as we've been doing since the council exiled us. I'm not here to steal anything from you. I didn't even know you existed until yesterday. I didn't know anything about my mom's people, because nobody in Konoha ever bothered to tell me, not because they were hiding some big secret plot, but because I grew up alone, and there was nobody left to tell me anything. His hands curled into fists. You want to know what I actually want? I want to know who my mom was. I want to learn whatever you're willing to teach me, so I can go back to Konoha and clear my team's names, and prove that the people who did this to us don't get to win. That's it. That's the whole plan. If that's not good enough for you, then fine, blindfold us and walk us back to the border, and we'll figure out the rest ourselves, like we've been doing. Silence rang out across the hall in the wake of that outburst, and then, unexpectedly, the old man with the clouded eye let out a low, rasping chuckle. Kushina's temper, he said, shaking his head slightly. Word for word. I'd know that particular flavor of stubborn anywhere. He tapped his staff against the floor once more, and this time the sound carried something almost like approval. Elder Maki's caution is not wrong to voice. But I have sat on this council long enough to recognize a lie, and long enough to recognize its absence. This boy is not lying to us. Elder Genzo speaks true, said another voice, a woman near the far end of the dais, younger than most of the others, her voice softer but no less certain. I've watched him this entire exchange. There's no calculation in him. Just grief, and stubbornness, and hope he's trying very hard not to show too much of. Naruto felt his face heat further at being so plainly read, but he didn't look away. Tsukiko raised a hand, and the murmuring elders quieted. The council's caution is warranted, and will not be dismissed lightly, she said. But I would remind everyone present of something else. Last night, this clan's chakra sensors registered a full activation of the Adamantine Sealing Chains, untrained, unprompted, in direct response to this land's ambient chakra recognizing Kushina's bloodline in her son. She let that settle over the hall. That is not something that can be faked. That is not a performance staged by Konoha's council to infiltrate us. That is this land itself, responding to blood it has not felt in 30 years. The hall fell quiet again, the weight of that statement settling over the assembled elders. Maki's expression didn't soften entirely, but something in her posture eased, fractionally. There is also, Isamu added, his voice carrying easily, the matter of the vision. Naruto's head snapped up. How do you know about that? Because this land does not keep secrets from those attuned to it, Isamu said simply. I felt the chakra fluctuation from your seal in the middle of the night, subtle, but unmistakable, and layered with a resonance signature I have not felt since Kushina herself trained on these grounds as a girl. You saw her, didn't you? Standing at the foot of your bed. The hall went utterly silent. Naruto swallowed hard. Yeah, he admitted. I did. I thought maybe I was just, I don't know, dreaming or exhausted or… You were not dreaming, Tsukiko said, and her voice had gone soft, almost reverent. This clan's Fuinjutsu traditions include techniques for binding fragments of chakra, memory, intention, even something resembling consciousness, into a bloodline seal, to be passed to descendants under the right conditions. It is exceptionally difficult. It requires enormous skill, enormous sacrifice, and land saturated with generations of ancestral chakra to properly anchor the technique. She looked at Naruto with something aching behind her composed expression. Kushina left this village as a child, but she trained here as a girl, before Konoha ever claimed her. It is entirely possible, likely, even, that some fragment of her chakra, some echo of her intention toward the son she never got to raise, found its way into the seal that binds the nine tails within you. And it is entirely possible that this land, recognizing her blood in you for the first time, allowed that fragment to surface. Naruto's throat had gone tight, his eyes burning. You're saying that was actually, some part of that was actually her? I am saying it is possible, Tsukiko said gently. I would not promise you certainty on a matter this delicate. But I would not dismiss it either. Kakashi, who had remained quiet through most of the exchange, watching everything with the careful attention of a man cataloging every possible angle, finally spoke. If that's true, he said, then this council already knows the answer to its own question. Naruto isn't a Konoha plant sent to steal your secrets. He's the last living piece of something this clan lost 30 years ago, and the land itself is telling you so. A long silence stretched across the hall. Elder Maki's sharp eyes moved from Naruto to Kakashi and back again, and finally, she inclined her head, not quite an apology, but something close to one. I withdraw my suspicion regarding the boy's intent, she said. I do not withdraw my caution regarding the other three. A seal cannot vouch for a copy ninja and an Uchiha survivor, whatever it says about an Uzumaki heir. Fair, Kakashi said simply, spreading his hands. Ask what you need to ask, and so they did. For the better part of an hour, the council questioned them, not hostile, exactly, not any longer, but thorough in a way that left no corner unexamined. They asked Kakashi about his history, his service in the war, his reasons for choosing exile over abandoning his students. They asked Sakura about her medical training, her loyalty, why a girl with no Uzumaki blood at all would walk willingly into banishment rather than stay behind in relative safety. And they asked Sasuke, carefully, pointedly, about his history with Orochimaru, with Akatsuki, with the darker chapters of his life that every shinobi in the elemental nations had at least heard whispered about. Sasuke answered without flinching, which surprised Naruto more than he expected it to. There was no defensiveness in it, no attempt to soften or excuse what he'd done, just a flat, honest accounting of a boy who had chased revenge into darkness, and clawed his way back out of it, one impossible decision at a time. I will not pretend my past is clean, Sasuke said finally, meeting Maki's sharp gaze directly. I did things I regret. I nearly became something I still have nightmares about becoming. But I came back. And I chose to stand beside this team when Konoha decided our lives were worth less than their politics. If that's not enough for your council, I understand. But I won't apologize for a past I've already spent years trying to make right. Maki studied him for a long moment, and something in her stern expression eased, just slightly. An honest answer, she said. More honest than I expected. I respect that more than I would respect a clean denial. Genzo, the old man with the clouded eye, leaned forward again, his staff tapping thoughtfully against the stone. There is something else worth considering, he said, addressing the council at large rather than Team 7 directly. This clan has spent 30 years in hiding, rebuilding in shadow, protecting what little remains of our heritage from a world that tried once to erase us entirely, and would likely try again if given the chance. That strategy has kept us alive. It has not made us strong. Our numbers do not grow the way they should. Our techniques, however refined, are practiced by fewer hands with every passing generation. He looked toward Naruto, something calculating behind his clouded eye. An Uzumaki heir, trained in our traditions, carrying both the Nine-Tails power and Kushina's bloodline. That is not merely a sentimental reunion. That is the single greatest asset this clan has been offered in 30 years. You're talking about him like he's a resource, Sakura said sharply, before she could stop herself. He's a person. He just lost his entire home. He's not here to be used, by you or by anyone else. A ripple of surprise went through several elders at the boldness of that interruption, but Tsukiko's expression, when Naruto glanced at her, held something close to approval. She is right to say so, Tsukiko said. And she is right to guard him so fiercely. That, too, tells this council something about the character of the people standing before us. She turned back to the hall. Elder Genzo is not wrong that this clan stands to gain a great deal from training Kushina's son, but I will not have this council treat him as a tool to be sharpened for our own restoration, whatever debt the world owes this family. If we take these four in, we take them in because it is right. Because a clan that survived annihilation should understand better than anyone what it means to be cast out unjustly, not merely because it is useful. Genzo inclined his head, conceding the point without argument. Rightly said, Tsukiko-sama. I withdraw the framing, if not the underlying truth. For a long moment, the hall fell into a different kind of quiet, not tense, not accusatory, but contemplative, 15 elders each turning the matter over in their own minds. weighing 30 years of hard-won caution against the plain, undeniable fact of what stood in front of them. Finally, Tsukiko rose from her seat at the dais' center, and the entire hall stilled to attention. I have heard enough to form my own judgment, she said, but this is not mine to decide alone. This clan survives because we make decisions together, as one body, the way we should have all those decades ago, when 3 villages moved against us and we discovered, too late, how much stronger we might have been united than divided. She looked out over the 4 exiles standing before the dais. But I will not ask this council to simply take your word, or even the testimony of a chakra-reactive seal, as sufficient grounds to open 30 years of guarded secrets to outsiders. Trust of that magnitude must be earned, not simply declared. Naruto's heart sank slightly. So what happens now? Now, Tsukiko said, you undergo trial? A murmur of approval rippled through the assembled elders, and Isamu, beside her, allowed himself the faintest satisfied smile. Each of you will be tested, Tsukiko continued, according to what this clan values most: precision, control, resolve, and the will to protect something greater than yourself. The trials will not be gentle. They are designed to reveal true character under pressure, not to flatter anyone's ego. If you pass, this council will open its training to you, fully, without reservation, for as long as you wish to remain and learn. If you fail, we leave, Kakashi finished quietly. You leave, Tsukiko confirmed. Blindfolded, as before, escorted safely to the border, and this village vanishes from your memory of the world as if it had never existed. That is the offer. Do you accept it? Naruto looked at Sakura, at Sasuke, at Kakashi, and saw in each of their faces the same thing he felt in his own chest: exhaustion, and fear, and underneath both of those, a stubborn, unkillable thread of hope that refused to let this chance slip away without a fight. We accept, Naruto said, and beside him, one by one, the others echoed the same. Tsukiko nodded once, decisively. Then rest today. Eat well. Prepare yourselves however you see fit. Her pale eyes swept over all 4 of them, something almost gentle beneath the formal authority of her position. The trials begin tomorrow, at first light. I will tell you honestly, this clan has broken stronger shinobi than the 4 of you on trials less demanding than what Isamu and Rinji have already begun preparing. Do not take this lightly. We won't, Sasuke said, his voice flat and certain. Good. Tsukiko's gaze lingered on Naruto for one final moment, something unspoken passing behind her pale eyes. Grief, maybe, or hope, or the aching, complicated weight of watching Kushina's son stand exactly where his mother had once stood, facing a version of the same impossible choice. Then may your mother's blood serve you better tomorrow than it has served the rest of us these past 30 years. The council began to disperse, elders rising from the dais and filing out through side doors and quiet conversation, the formal weight of the hall easing back into something more ordinary. Isamu approached Naruto directly as the crowd thinned, his dark eyes studying him with renewed, sharpened interest. Get some rest tonight, he said. Really rest, not just lie there staring at the ceiling like I suspect you did last night. Chain manifestation under controlled conditions is nothing like an involuntary flare in the middle of the night. Tomorrow, I intend to see exactly what you can do when you're actually trying. You'll be testing me? Naruto asked. I requested it specifically, Isamu said, something almost like a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. I trained your mother when she was younger than you are now. I would very much like to see what her son can do. That evening, as the hidden basin settled into the soft blue hush of dusk, Naruto found himself sitting alone on the edge of one of the raised wooden walkways, legs dangling over open air, staring out at the spiral rooftops glowing faintly gold with embedded seals in the gathering dark. Behind him, he heard familiar footsteps, and didn't need to turn to know who they belonged to. You okay? Sakura asked, settling down beside him. Yeah, Naruto said, then reconsidered. I don't know. Everything's just a lot. Yesterday we got exiled from our home. Today I found out my mom might have left a piece of herself sealed inside me. Tomorrow apparently a bunch of strangers are going to test whether I'm worthy of learning about my own family's legacy. He huffed a short, tired laugh. It's a lot, Sakura-chan. It is, she agreed simply, not trying to minimize it. She was quiet for a moment, watching the seals glow softly across the rooftops below. For what it's worth, I don't think you have anything to prove to them. Not really. I think you already proved everything that matters, back in that courtroom in Konoha, and every single day before that. Maybe, Naruto said. But I want this, Sakura. I want to actually know something about where I came from, instead of just pieces. Fragments other people hand me when it's convenient. I want to earn it properly, so it's actually mine. Sakura smiled slightly, bumping her shoulder gently against his. Then we'll earn it. Together. Same as everything else. Down below, in the deepening dark, faint golden light traced its way along seal lines worked into every rooftop and walkway of the hidden village, a clan's entire history, preserved in chakra and stone, waiting to see if it had finally found someone worth trusting with it. And somewhere in the quiet space between exhaustion and sleep, Naruto thought he felt it again, faint, fleeting, barely there at all. A warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the Nine Tails, and everything to do with a mother he was only just beginning to know. Dawn broke over the hidden basin in slow, hazy layers of gold and gray, sunlight easing down through the narrow gap in the cliffs overhead like water filling a bowl. Naruto had barely slept, not from the restlessness of the night before, but from something closer to anticipation, a coiled, humming energy in his chest that refused to settle no matter how many times he told himself to just close his eyes and rest. By the time Ki knocked on the guest house door, all four of them were already awake, dressed, and waiting. Good, she said, taking in the sight of them with a faint approving nod. Punctuality. That's one small mark in your favor before we've even started. She gestured for them to follow. Eat something light. Whatever's coming, you'll want your stomach settled, not full. They followed her out past the edge of the settlement, along a narrow trail that wound upward through terraced stone and overgrown ruins until it opened onto a wide, flat plateau overlooking the ocean, clearly cleared and maintained specifically for this purpose, its surface worked through with seal markings and patterns Naruto didn't recognize, concentric rings radiating outward from a central point like ripples frozen mid-motion. Tsukiko was already waiting there, along with Renji, Isamu, and Elder Maki, whose stern expression this morning seemed, if anything, even more severe than it had been in the council hall the day before. Behind them, a small cluster of other villagers had gathered at a respectful distance, not the full council, but enough witnesses to make clear that whatever happened here today would not go unnoticed. For trials, Tsukiko said without preamble, once Team 7 had assembled in front of her. For disciplines this clan holds sacred. Each of you will face the trial matched to what we most need to understand about your character. Fail, and this council's decision stands. You leave, and the matter is closed. Succeed, and the doors of Uzumaki are open to you fully. She paused, letting her pale eyes move across each of their faces in turn. I will say this only once. These trials are not designed to be survivable through raw talent alone. They are designed to break comfortable assumptions people carry about themselves. Whatever you think you know about your own limits, today may prove you wrong. Naruto swallowed hard, glancing sideways at Sasuke, whose expression remained carefully, deliberately blank, though the tension in his shoulders gave away more than he probably intended. Who goes first? Kakashi asked. Sasuke Uchiha Maki said, stepping forward, her sharp eyes fixed on him with something that looked almost like a challenge. The Sharingan is a bloodline this clan has crossed paths with before, not always to our benefit. I would see for myself what kind of eyes you carry, and what kind of mind sits behind them. The trial ground Maki led Sasuke to was smaller than the plateau, a circular clearing ringed with standing stones, each one etched top to bottom with looping, interlocking seal script that seemed to shift and shimmer faintly when Naruto tried to look at it directly. This is the mirrored lattice, Maki explained, standing at the circle's edge. A trial this clan designed generations ago to test perception under deliberate deception. The stones will project a series of illusions layered directly into your visual field, not genjutsu in the way you understand it, but sealed visual constructs, woven from ambient chakra rather than an opponent's own. Your Sharingan will see through some of them easily. Others are built specifically to exploit the way a Sharingan processes information, to overload it, rather than deceive it. Sasuke's jaw tightened slightly. You're saying this could hurt me? I am saying, Maki said, that a mind unprepared for that kind of overload can suffer real damage. Disorientation. Migraine severe enough to incapacitate. In rare cases, temporary loss of vision. Her sharp eyes didn't waver. I will not pretend this is without risk. If you wish to withdraw, no one here will think less of you for it. Sasuke's eyes had already begun to bleed red, the tomo sharpening into focus even as she spoke. I've survived worse than a headache, he said flatly. Begin. Kakashi, standing at the clearing's edge beside Naruto and Sakura, felt his stomach tighten with something he recognized immediately as a sensei's particular, helpless dread, the specific feeling of watching a student walk deliberately into danger you have no power to stop, because stopping them would cost them something they need far more than safety. He'll be fine, Sakura murmured, though her own hands had curled tight at her sides, medical instincts already screaming at the mere mention of vision loss. He'd better be, Kakashi said quietly. Maki raised one hand, and the standing stones around the clearing flared to life in unison, seal script blazing gold before dissolving into shifting waves of visual distortion. Sasuke's body went rigid the instant it hit, his Sharingan spinning wildly, tracking dozens of layered, contradictory images all at once, the world around him fracturing into overlapping planes that didn't align with each other no matter how his eyes tried to force them into coherence. This is nothing like genjutsu, he thought, gritting his teeth against the disorienting nausea building behind his eyes. Genjutsu deceives the mind through the eyes. This is attacking the eyes directly. He forced himself to slow his breathing, to stop trying to process every layer at once. The exact mistake, he realized abruptly, that the trial was designed to punish. A Sharingan's instinct was to see everything, to track every detail, every movement, every flicker of chakra. Here, that instinct was a liability. Here, trying to perceive everything meant perceiving nothing clearly at all. He closed his eyes. For a heartbeat, the world went dark and silent, and the vertigo eased fractionally. Then he opened them again, not wide, not searching, but narrow, focused, deliberately restricting his own field of perception to a single point at a time, the way Itachi had once taught him, in a lifetime that felt impossibly distant now, to control the Sharingan's power rather than let it control him. One image. Then the next. Then the next. Slow, deliberate, methodical, refusing to let the layered illusions overwhelm him all at once, processing them instead the way he might read a scroll, one line at a time. The standing stones flared brighter, the pressure behind his eyes building towards something sharp and blinding, and for one terrible moment, his vision doubled, tripled, fractured into a kaleidoscope of conflicting images that sent a spike of genuine pain lancing through his skull. Sasuke! Sakura's voice cracked across the clearing, alarm sharpening every syllable, as his knees buckled slightly, one hand flying up to press against his temple. Hold, Maki said sharply, though whether the command was for Sakura or for Sasuke himself wasn't entirely clear. The trial is not yet failed. Sasuke forced himself upright through sheer stubborn will, blood beginning to bead at the corner of his eye, the telltale sign of a Sharingan pushed dangerously close to its limits. But beneath the pain, something in him had found its footing, some old, hard-won discipline surfacing through the chaos. One image. Then the next. He wasn't trying to see everything anymore. He was choosing, deliberately, precisely, exactly what to see, and letting the rest blur past unprocessed, irrelevant, deliberately ignored. The fractured illusions began, slowly, to resolve. It took nearly 3 full minutes, an eternity, under that kind of strain, before Sasuke finally exhaled a long, shaking breath, and the standing stones dimmed back to their ordinary, inert gray. His Sharingan deactivated on its own, chakra exhausted, and he swayed on his feet for a moment before catching himself, one hand braced against his knee, blood trickling in a thin line down his cheek. Sakura was at his side instantly, her hands already glowing green with medical chakra, checking his eyes with brisk, professional efficiency even as worry etched deep lines across her face. Talk to me, she said. Can you see clearly? Any blurring, any double vision? I'm fine, Sasuke said, though his voice was rougher than usual, strained around the edges. That's not an answer. It's a little blurry, he admitted, grudging. It's fading. Maki crossed the clearing slowly, studying him with an expression that had shifted, subtly, from clinical assessment to something closer to genuine respect. Most shinobi who face the mirrored lattice for the first time fail within the first 30 seconds, she said. The instinct to perceive everything at once is almost impossible to override without training specifically for it. You found the discipline to restrict your own perception under active neural strain, on your very first attempt. She paused. That is not merely talent, Uchiha. That is discipline forged the hard way. I would ask what forged it, but I suspect I already know enough of the answer from what you told this council yesterday. Sasuke didn't answer that directly, just straightened slowly, wiping the thin line of blood from his cheek with the back of his hand. Did I pass? You passed, Maki confirmed. Rest now. Let the strain fade fully before you push that eye again today. Sakura's trial waited in a different part of the settlement entirely, a quiet workshop space near Rinji's own quarters, its walls lined with shelves of ink pots, brush sets, and rolled paper in every conceivable grade and texture, a low work table set at its center bearing a single blank scroll, inkstone, and brush. Fuinjutsu, Rinji explained, gesturing for Sakura to sit at the table, is not merely calligraphy with chakra behind it, whatever outsiders might assume. It is architecture. Every line must bear weight. Every curve must connect to what comes before and after it, or the entire structure collapses the moment chakra is poured into it, sometimes violently. He set a small, sealed scroll on the table beside her. This is a standard clan exercise, given to every child in this village at the age of 10. A precision containment seal, deceptively simple in appearance, brutally unforgiving in execution. One stroke out of alignment by even a fraction, and the seal fails to hold. Draw it correctly, and it will contain a small measure of chakra safely. Draw it incorrectly. Let me guess, Sakura said dryly, already studying the reference diagram he'd unrolled beside her. It doesn't contain the chakra safely. It releases it explosively, in whatever direction the flawed line happens to be weakest, Rinji confirmed, entirely matter-of-fact about it. Nothing catastrophic at this scale, a child's exercise, remember, but enough to singe your fingers rather badly if your control isn't precise enough. Ready? Sakura studied the reference pattern for a long moment, an intricate lattice of interlocking spirals and connecting lines, dense with detail in a way that made her chest tighten slightly with the sheer weight of precision it demanded. But underneath the nerves, something else stirred too, a familiar, focused calm, the same steady clarity she'd learned to summon in the middle of a battlefield, elbow deep in a wound that needed exact, unhesitating hands to close it correctly. This isn't so different from surgery, she realized, picking up the brush and testing its weight in her fingers. Precision. Control. No room for hesitation once you commit to the line. Ready, she said, and dipped the brush into the ink. The first strokes came slow, deliberate, Sakura's chakra-honed control translating almost naturally into the steadiness of her hand. Years of medical ninjutsu had taught her, more thoroughly than almost anyone else could claim, exactly how to modulate the finest gradations of pressure and flow, how a single trembling millimeter could mean the difference between healing and harm. She worked through the outer ring of the seal first, then the connecting spokes, then the dense inner lattice, her brow furrowed in total concentration, the rest of the workshop fading entirely out of her awareness. Rinji watched in silence, his initial polite expectation shifting, slowly, into something sharper and more attentive. Isamu, who had wandered in partway through to observe, exchanged a glance with him that needed no words. It took Sakura nearly 40 minutes to complete the seal, considerably longer than the standard time Rinji usually allotted for the exercise, but he said nothing, watching her work with the patient, careful thoroughness of a surgeon rather than the rushed confidence of someone simply trying to finish. When she finally set the brush down, flexing her cramped fingers, the completed seal glowed faintly on the page, its lines crisp and unbroken from center to edge. Test it, Rinji said quietly. Sakura took a slow breath, pressed 2 fingers to the center of the seal, and fed a careful thread of chakra into it. The seal held. A faint golden shimmer traced along every line of the lattice, contained and stable, humming gently for a long moment before settling into quiet dormancy. Exactly, precisely, as it was meant to. Perfect containment, Rinji said, and there was no mistaking the genuine surprise in his voice now. First attempt. Do you understand how rare that is, Harino Sakura? Most clan children require a dozen attempts before achieving stable containment on this exercise. Some require dozens more. I've spent years learning to control chakra down to the smallest possible margin, Sakura said, still a little breathless from the effort, but unable to fully suppress the small, proud flicker of a smile tugging at her mouth. Medical ninjutsu doesn't forgive sloppy control. A misaligned thread of chakra in the wrong place can kill a patient instead of saving them. I guess that translates. It more than translates, Isamu said, stepping further into the workshop, studying the glowing seal with open interest. Renji, this is precisely the kind of foundation you've been saying this clan needs more of. Precision this refined, paired with proper Uzumaki Fuinjutsu training. We are getting ahead of ourselves, Renji said, though the faint smile tugging at the corner of his own mouth undercut the caution in his words. He looked back at Sakura. Something like genuine respect settled into his expression now. You have passed, and passed remarkably. Whatever else this trial was meant to test, you have already answered it. Precision like yours is not simply talent. It is discipline built through years of refusing to let a single mistake cost someone their life. This clan understands that discipline very well. Sakura felt something warm settle in her chest at that, not just relief at having passed, but something deeper, something that had been quietly aching in her since the courtroom in Konoha, valued for something beyond being the team's healer. It was a small thing, maybe, in the grand scheme of everything happening around them. But it mattered more than she expected it to. Naruto's trial, by contrast, would not be quiet. Isamu led him back up to the wide, seal-marked plateau overlooking the ocean, the concentric rings of ancient sealwork radiating outward beneath their feet, the crash of waves against the cliffs far below providing a low, constant undercurrent of sound. Kakashi and Sakura, the latter having rejoined the group after her own trial's conclusion, Sasuke walking stiffly but steadily beside her, still recovering from the strain of the mirrored lattice, took up positions at the plateau's edge, watching with a mixture of nerves and cautious hope. The Adamantine Sealing Chains, Isamu said, his voice carrying easily across the open space, are among the rarest and most demanding techniques this clan has ever produced. They are not simply a weapon, they are an extension of the user's own chakra-given physical form, chains capable of binding even-tailed beasts, forged from will and control in equal measure. Your mother mastered them by the time she was younger than you are now. I trained her myself, on this very ground. Naruto's chest tightened at that, a complicated tangle of pride and grief and something that felt uncomfortably close to pressure. No offense, but that's a lot to live up to. It is, Isamu agreed simply, without softening it. I will not pretend otherwise, and I would not respect you if you asked me to, but you have already manifested a fragment of this technique once, involuntarily, in response to this land's ambient chakra recognizing your blood. Today, I want to see what you can do when you are actually trying, and more importantly, I want to see what you do when it does not come easily. He gestured to the wide ring of seals beneath their feet. This trial ground amplifies and stabilizes ambient chakra resonance, allowing techniques tied to bloodline memory to manifest more readily than they would elsewhere. It is, in effect, the closest thing this clan has to training wheels for a technique this demanding. Even with that advantage, I do not expect full mastery from you today. I expect effort. I expect control under strain, and I expect you to tell me the truth about your limits, rather than pushing past them out of pride, because this technique does not forgive recklessness. Got it, Naruto said, rolling his shoulders, feeling the familiar hum of chakra rising through his core, mingling, as it always did now, seamlessly, since the day he and Kurama had finally understood each other, with the deeper, warmer thrum of the Nine-Tails' own vast reserves. So how do I actually do this? Close your eyes, Isamu instructed. Do not reach for the chains the way you would reach for an ordinary jutsu, through hand signs, through deliberate technique. The chains respond to intention, to the will to bind and protect something precious to you. Your mother summoned them for the first time not through training, but through desperate need, to save a friend's life, if the old records are accurate. Find that same well within yourself, something worth protecting badly enough that your chakra itself refuses to let it be lost. Naruto closed his eyes, and for a moment, his mind flooded with images, Sakura's face in the courtroom, pale and furious and refusing to give up. Sasuke's flat, honest confession to the council, choosing to stand with them despite everything he'd already lost. Kakashi's quiet, unshakable loyalty, forehead protector surrendered without hesitation. Iruka's proud face across a ramen counter years ago, the first person who ever looked at him like he mattered. Tsunade's cracked voice at the gate, "I'm so sorry. This is the only way I can keep you alive." Konohamaru's small, furious voice, "We'll get you back, believe it." A woman with wild red hair, standing at the foot of his sleeping mat, watching him with aching, impossible tenderness. Something in his chest cracked open, and gold light erupted from his skin in thick, glowing chains, bursting outward with such sudden, violent force that Isamu was forced to leap backward, and Kakashi's hand shot instinctively to a kunai he no longer carried out of pure old instinct. "Naruto!" Sakura shouted, alarmed, as the chains lashed wildly across the plateau, gouging deep furrows into the ancient stone, chakra pouring out of him faster than his conscious mind could direct or control it. "Let it happen!" Isamu called back, though his own voice carried an edge of genuine concern now. "Don't fight it, guide it. Feel where the chains want to go, and choose the direction instead of letting the direction choose you." Naruto gritted his teeth, sweat beading on his brow despite the cool morning air, forcing himself to focus through the overwhelming rush of raw, uncontrolled power surging through him. It was nothing like molding chakra for an ordinary jutsu. There was no clean, practiced pathway to follow, no familiar hand signs to anchor the technique into something predictable. It was pure, distilled will, chaotic and enormous, and trying to control it felt like trying to grab hold of a flood with his bare hands. "Guide it, don't fight it." He stopped trying to force the chains to obey him and instead tried, desperately, to simply feel them, the way they wanted to move, the direction they were already straining toward, and slowly, incrementally, began to nudge rather than command, shaping the flood instead of damming it outright. One chain, then another, began to slow, to arc more deliberately through the air instead of lashing wildly, gold light coiling and uncoiling in patterns that started, gradually, to resemble control rather than chaos. "That's it," Isamu called, something like genuine excitement creeping into his voice now. "That's exactly it. Keep going." Naruto opened his eyes, chains still blazing gold around him but responding now, slowly, imperfectly, but responding, to the direction of his will, extending outward across the plateau in long, sweeping arcs before curling back toward him, testing the boundaries of a control he was building, quite literally, in real time. It lasted perhaps 90 seconds before his chakra reserves, vast as they were, even with Kurama's assistance, began to strain under the sheer, unfamiliar demand of the technique, and the chains flickered, then dissolved back into motes of golden light, leaving Naruto swaying on his feet, breathing hard, his shirt soaked through with sweat. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The plateau bored deep, scorched furrows where the chains had first lashed out uncontrolled, gouged so deep into ancient stone that Naruto felt a fresh wave of guilt looking at the damage. "Sorry," he managed, still catching his breath. "I kind of wrecked your training ground a little." Isamu let out a short, startled bark of laughter, shaking his head slowly. "This plateau has weathered failed trials for 30 years, boy. A few new scars are the least of my concerns." He crossed the distance between them, studying Naruto with open, genuine astonishment. "Do you have any idea what you just did? Most Uzumaki who manifest this technique for the first time cannot bring it under any degree of conscious control for weeks, sometimes months of dedicated training. You brought 90 seconds of raw, chaotic power into partial obedience on your very first deliberate attempt. Is that good?" Naruto asked, still a little dazed. "That," Isamu said, "is your mother's talent, awakened in a body that has spent 17 years carrying twice the chakra reserves she ever had to work with. I have trained this technique for 3 decades. I have never seen anyone bring it under partial control this quickly." He clapped a firm hand on Naruto's shoulder. "You passed, Naruto Uzumaki. Passed far beyond what this trial required of you. Now go rest before you collapse where you're standing." Naruto grinned, exhausted but genuinely, fiercely proud, and let Sakura half support his weight as she hurried over, already scanning him with medical chakra out of pure automatic habit. That left only Kakashi. His trial, Tsukiko explained once the group reconvened near the council hall in the early afternoon, would look different from the others entirely, not a test of technique, but of something this clan valued even more highly, forged as it was from 30 years of learning, the hard way, exactly who could and could not be trusted with a secret worth dying to protect. "A test of loyalty," she said simply, leading him alone toward a quiet chamber adjoining the main hall, cannot be measured through demonstration. It can only be measured through choice, made under pressure, when the easier path lies directly beside the harder, truer one. Inside the chamber waited a single scroll, sealed and marked with the spiral crest of the clan, resting on a low table. This scroll, Tsukiko said, contains a technique this clan considers among its most closely guarded. Knowledge that, if it reached the wrong hands, could be turned into something genuinely dangerous. I am going to offer you a choice, Hatake Kakashi, and I want you to understand plainly what each option costs. She met his single visible eye steadily. Option 1. Open this scroll now, alone, without this clan's permission, and absorb whatever knowledge it holds before anyone can stop you. You have the skill to copy techniques at a glance. I am aware of your reputation. No one in this chamber could stop you from doing exactly that, right now, if you chose to. And with knowledge like this in your possession, you would hold considerable leverage over this clan, and perhaps even over Konoha's council, once you returned home with proof of what you'd learned. Kakashi's visible eye narrowed slightly. And option 2? Trust this clan to share that knowledge with you, in its own time, on its own terms, without demanding it, without taking it, even when the opportunity to simply seize it sits directly in front of you. Tsukiko's expression remained perfectly unreadable. Choose freely. No one is watching this chamber but the two of us. Kakashi looked at the sealed scroll for a long, quiet moment, at the temptation it represented, not for personal gain, but for something more complicated, proof, leverage, a weapon he could carry back to Konoha that might actually force the council to listen, to overturn an exile built on lies. It would be so easy. A single glance from his left eye, and whatever secrets that scroll held would be his forever, copied and preserved beyond anyone's ability to take back. He thought of Obito. Of a promise made a lifetime ago, in the rubble of a collapsed cave, about protecting the people who mattered rather than simply taking whatever power came within reach. He thought of Naruto, of Sakura, of Sasuke, and what it would mean for their trust in him if he broke faith with this clan the very first day they'd offered any of them real hospitality. No, Kakashi said quietly, and pushed the scroll gently back across the table, untouched. It's not mine to take. If your clan decides to trust me with it someday, that trust will mean something. If I steal it today, it wouldn't be worth anything at all, to me, or to them. Tsukiko's expression finally shifted, not dramatically, but unmistakably, something like quiet, genuine satisfaction settling into the lines of her weathered face. That, she said, is the correct answer? Not because refusing was clever, Hatake Kakashi, but because it was honest. This clan has been betrayed before, by people who could not resist convenient power sitting unguarded in front of them. You are not one of those people. Kakashi allowed himself a small, tired smile beneath his mask. Did I pass then? You passed, Tsukiko confirmed. All four of you passed, in your own ways, precisely as this land already told me you would, the moment I felt Kushina's chakra answer in her son's blood. She rose from the table, moving toward the chamber door. Come. The others will want to hear this from you directly, and I suspect Naruto in particular has earned the right to a proper night's rest after the display he put on this morning. That evening, the four of them gathered once more in the meeting hall, no longer strangers standing trial before a wary council, but something new and still forming, welcomed now with genuine warmth rather than cautious suspicion. Tsukiko herself poured the tea this time, and Rinji laid out an elaborate spread of grilled fish and rice in what was, unmistakably, a small celebration. Tomorrow, Tsukiko said, raising her cup, your training begins in earnest. Isamu will take Naruto to deepen his work with the chains. Rinji will begin Sakura's formal Fuinjutsu instruction, and Sasuke, she glanced toward him, something thoughtful in her expression. I suspect Rinji will want you as well, once his eyes have fully recovered. A Sharingan capable of restricting its own perception under strain has significant potential for seal work this clan has not properly explored in generations. Sasuke inclined his head slightly, saying nothing, though something in his posture had eased, fractionally, since the tension of the morning's trial. And Kakashi, Tsukiko continued, this clan owes you our own kind of respect, for choosing loyalty over leverage when leverage was freely offered. I suspect there is a great deal this clan's archives could teach even a copy ninja of your reputation, if you are willing to learn. I'm willing, Kakashi said simply. Naruto raised his own cup of tea, grinning despite the bone-deep exhaustion still sitting heavy in his limbs. To Team 7, he said. Exiled, tested, and somehow still standing. To Team 7, the others echoed, cups clinking together in the warm, firelit hall. But even as the celebration settled into easy, relieved laughter around him, Naruto's eyes drifted, unbidden, toward the shadowed edge of the hall, where, for just a fraction of a second, he thought he glimpsed a familiar, translucent shape watching him from the darkness, wild red hair catching the firelight, before it dissolved back into shadow as quickly as it had appeared. Soon, he thought, a strange, aching warmth settling in his chest. I'm going to know everything about you, Mom. I promise. Outside, high above the hidden basin, the first stars were beginning to appear in the narrow strip of visible sky, distant, steady, and for the first time in days, watching over something that finally felt, however fragile and new, like it might actually become home. The morning after the trials, Naruto woke before his alarm even had the chance to matter, the strange, coiled anticipation in his chest pulling him out of sleep well before the sun had fully cleared the narrow gap of sky above the hidden basin. He lay still for a moment, staring at the timbered ceiling, listening to the quiet, steady breathing of Sasuke and Kakashi still asleep nearby, and thought, with a clarity that surprised him, today I actually start learning who my mom was. It wasn't power he was chasing, not really, though the memory of those 90 chaotic, glorious seconds on the plateau still hummed under his skin like static. It was something quieter than that, and much older. Every kid who grows up without parents builds a version of them in their head, stitched together out of second-hand stories, and the shape of the hole they left behind. Naruto had done that too, for years. A blurry, half-imagined Kushina assembled out of Jiraiya's rare offhand comments, out of the fourth Hokage's face carved into the mountainside, out of nothing much at all. Today, for the first time in his life, he was going to learn about her from people who had actually known her. Not stories about a hero. A person. He was dressed and out the door before Sakura had even finished her tea. Isamu was waiting for him on the plateau, the deep scorch marks from the day before still visible in the ancient stone, though someone had clearly already worked to smooth the worst of the damage with careful, patient hands overnight. The chain master stood with his arms crossed, forearms bare, the spiraling scars along his skin catching the early light. You're early, he observed, not unkindly. Couldn't sleep, Naruto admitted. Too excited, I guess. Good, Isamu said. Excitement is useful, up to a point. It will also get you hurt today if you let it run ahead of your discipline, so listen carefully before you start reaching for anything. He gestured for Naruto to sit across from him on the stone, settling down himself with the unhurried ease of a man who had spent 30 years teaching this exact technique and had learned, the hard way, exactly how much patience it demanded. Yesterday, you manifested the Adamantine Sealing Chains through raw emotional intensity, desperation, love, the will to protect something precious. That is how the technique is born in every Uzumaki who ever carried it. It is not, however, how the technique is mastered. Do you understand the difference? Naruto frowned, turning that over. I guess, yesterday I kind of just let it happen. Like opening a floodgate, and hoping I could steer the water once it was already moving. An apt comparison, Isamu said, something like approval flickering across his weathered face. And an approach that will eventually get you or someone standing near you seriously hurt, because a floodgate opened in desperation does not care what stands in its path. True mastery of this technique means being able to summon the chains deliberately, not only when your back is against the wall, and your heart is breaking open, but calmly, precisely, on command, with exactly as much force as the situation actually requires. A single restraining chain to hold a struggling prisoner. A dozen, woven into an unbreakable cage, to contain something far more dangerous. The chains should answer your will the way your own hand answers it, not the other way around. Okay, Naruto said, nodding slowly, trying to hold on to the shape of that idea even as impatience buzzed under his skin, itching to just try again. So how do I get from yesterday to that? Slowly, Isamu said with the faint, dry humor of a teacher who had clearly answered that exact question from a great many impatient students before. We begin with something smaller than a flood, a single thread. It did not go well at first. Naruto closed his eyes, reaching for the same well of feeling that had cracked his chakra open the day before. Sakura's face in the courtroom, Kakashi's forehead protector surrendered without hesitation, the ache of his mother's translucent shape standing at the foot of his bed, and immediately, predictably, the chains erupted in a wild golden burst, scorching a fresh gouge into the already damaged stone and sending Isamu diving sideways with a startled curse that was considerably less composed than his usual measured tone. "Stop," Isamu said, once the light had faded and Naruto stood there, breathing hard, sheepish. "That is exactly the mistake I asked you not to make. You reached for the flood again." "Sorry. I don't actually know how to reach for anything smaller. It's not like there's a volume dial." "There is," Isamu said, climbing back to his feet and brushing dust from his robes with the patient long-suffering of a man who had genuinely expected this exact outcome. "You simply have not found it yet, because you have spent 17 years learning to fight with everything you have, all at once, because that is what survival demanded of you. Holding back has never once kept you alive. I understand that instinct. But this technique requires the opposite instinct entirely." They tried again. And again. Each time, Naruto reached for something smaller, gentler, a single thread instead of a flood, and each time, the chains either failed to manifest at all, sputtering out as faint, formless motes of gold light that dissolved before they could take shape, or burst forth in the same uncontrolled violence as before, as if his chakra simply didn't know how to do anything by half measures. By mid-morning, sweat soaked through his shirt and frustration had begun to crack visibly through his usually stubborn optimism. "This is stupid," he muttered, sitting down hard on the scorched stone, glaring at his own hands like they'd personally betrayed him. "I got 90 seconds of actual control yesterday. Why can't I even manage one stupid thread today?" "Because yesterday, your chakra had nowhere else to go but forward," Isamu said, settling down across from him again, unbothered by the outburst. "Desperation is a blunt tool, but it is an effective one. It does not leave room for hesitation or overthinking. Precision requires the opposite. It requires you to hold enormous power in reserve while releasing only a fraction of it, deliberately, and that is a far harder discipline than simply letting everything go at once." He paused, studying Naruto's frustrated expression with something that looked, unexpectedly, like real sympathy. "Tell me, when you fight, truly fight, against an opponent who could kill you, what do you feel, in the moment just before the chakra takes over?" Naruto thought about it, genuinely thought about it, memory flickering back through a dozen battles, against Pain, against Obito, against Kaguya herself in the final desperate hours of the war. "I don't really feel anything specific," he admitted slowly. "It's more like, everything just narrows down to the thing in front of me. Nothing else exists in that second. Just what needs to happen next." "That," Isamu said, "is closer to what you need. Not desperation. Focus. A single point of intention, narrowed down until nothing else exists beside it." He nodded toward Naruto's open palm. "Try again. But this time, do not think about everything you love, all at once, all in a flood. Think of one single thing. One person. One thread of feeling, narrow and specific, instead of the entire ocean." Naruto closed his eyes again, and this time, instead of letting the flood of memory and grief and love wash over him all at once, he tried to isolate a single strand of it. He thought of Sakura's hand on his shoulder, steady and certain, back in the guest house that first terrible night. Just that. Just her hand, and the quiet, unshakable loyalty behind it. A single thin thread of golden chakra flickered into existence above his open palm, faint, wavering, but unmistakably controlled, curling gently in the air like a ribbon caught on a breeze rather than exploding outward in violent, chaotic force. Isamu went very still. "There," he said quietly. "That. Hold it. Don't reach for more, just hold exactly what you have." Naruto's breath caught, and for a long, trembling moment, the single delicate chain held steady above his palm, glowing soft and gold in the morning light. His whole body wanted to push harder, to see how much more he could summon, but he forced himself to resist the urge, holding the thread exactly as it was, feeling for the first time the strange, specific discipline of restraint layered over enormous, barely tapped power. Then it flickered out, chakra spent faster than he expected, and he slumped slightly, breathing hard, but grinning despite the exhaustion. I did it, he said. That was actually control, right? Not just an accident. That was control, Isamu confirmed, and there was real warmth in his voice now, the kind that came from watching a lesson finally land. A single thread, held on command, released on command. It is the smallest possible step. But it is the correct one, and you found it faster than most students I have trained. He rose, offering Naruto a hand up. Rest for a few minutes, then we try it again, and again, until a single thread becomes second nature, and only then do we build toward two. They worked through the morning that way, slow, deliberate, methodical, Naruto summoning single threads of chain again and again until the golden light began to feel less like an explosion barely contained and more like an extension of his own hand, responsive in a way it hadn't been the day before. It was, in its own way, harder than the wild, chaotic burst of power from the first trial, harder because it demanded patience from someone who had spent his entire life associating patience with being left behind, being overlooked, being told to wait his turn. But something in him settled into it anyway, the way water eventually finds its level. By the time the sun stood high overhead, he could summon 3 threads at once, weaving them slowly through the air in patterns he directed rather than merely survived. It was during a brief rest, sharing water and a simple midday meal Keed had brought up to the plateau, that Isamu finally began to talk, not about technique, but about the woman whose shadow Naruto had spent the entire morning chasing. Your mother trained on this exact ground, Isamu said, settling back against a low outcropping of stone, his gaze distant, turned inward toward memory. She was younger than you are now, maybe 14, 15. Loud. Stubborn beyond all reason. The other children used to call her red-hot-blooded habanero, half in admiration and half in genuine terror, because she had a temper that could level a training ground faster than most jutsu could. Naruto huffed a startled laugh. That sounds a lot like me. It should, Isamu said, a faint smile ghosting across his weathered face. The resemblance is not subtle, believe me. She struggled with the chains too, when she first began. Burst threads, scorched training grounds, the whole village learning to give the plateau a wide berth on days she trained. It took her the better part of a year to master the kind of control you found in a single morning. He paused, something more solemn settling over his expression. I want you to understand something, Naruto. This clan lost her twice. Once, when she left this village as a child, sent away as part of an old alliance agreement, a decision made for political necessity, not for her own wishes, though she came to love Konoha in her own time, in her own way. And a second time, 17 years ago, when we learned what had happened to Uzumaki last daughter on the night her son was born. Naruto's chest tightened. You found out? Even hidden all the way out here? Fuinjutsu of that magnitude leaves traces across enormous distances, if you know precisely how to look for them, Isamu said quietly. We felt it the night it happened, a seal of extraordinary complexity and sacrifice, cast far to the north, carrying signatures unmistakably Uzumaki in origin. We did not know, then, whose hands had cast it, or what price had been paid to complete it. It took years before whispers finally reached us of Kushina Uzumaki's death, and by then, this clan had already spent decades perfecting the discipline of grieving quietly, in shadow, without ever letting the wider world see how deeply each loss still cut. Naruto stared down at his own hands, turning the words over slowly. I never really got to grieve her properly, he admitted, quiet and raw in a way he rarely let himself be, even with people he trusted. I mean, how do you grieve someone you never actually knew? I spent my whole life just missing a shape where a person should have been. Not even a real memory. Just an absence. Isamu was quiet for a long moment, watching him with an expression that held more understanding than Naruto had expected from someone he'd only just met 2 days ago. Then perhaps, he said finally, part of what this training offers you is not merely a technique, but the chance to fill in some small part of that absence. Not with a fantasy. With truth. I cannot give you the years you lost with her. No one can. But I can tell you who she actually was, beyond the shape of what's missing, and perhaps that is worth something too. Naruto's throat had gone tight, and he nodded, not quite trusting his voice yet. She loved ramen more than any person I have ever known, Isamu said, and something in his tone shifted, lighter now, deliberately so, giving Naruto space to breathe before the weight of the conversation settled too heavy. Miso, specifically. She used to sneak away from her own training exercises to bother the cooks in the village kitchens for extra portions, and somehow always managed to talk her way into getting them. Naruto let out a startled, wet laugh, wiping quickly at his eyes. Okay, that's actually really funny. I had no idea. I mean, I love ramen too, but I always figured that was just, like, a me thing. It was very much a her thing first, Isamu said, smiling properly now. She used to say a bowl of good ramen could fix nearly any bad day, and given the temper on her, she tested that theory rather thoroughly and rather often. He paused, something gentler crossing his face. She was fierce, and loud, and utterly without patience for cruelty of any kind, the sort of person who would throw herself bodily between a bully and their target without a second's hesitation, regardless of the size difference, or the risk to herself. She hated seeing anyone left out, anyone made to feel small. I think, if she is watching you now, wherever her spirit rests, she is proud beyond words of the man that same fierce, protective heart grew into. Naruto pressed the heel of his hand hard against his eyes, unable to hold back the tears any longer, and Isamu, with the quiet tact of a man who understood grief far better than his gruff exterior let on, simply sat with him in silence, letting the moment be exactly as heavy as it needed to be. They resumed training an hour later, and something had shifted in Naruto, not weaker for the tears, but somehow steadier. The grief settled into something he could carry rather than something threatening to knock him flat. The threads of chain came easier now, responding with a clarity that surprised even Isamu, who watched with growing, unhidden astonishment as Naruto pushed from 3 threads to 5, then to a full, coordinated weave that arced gracefully across the plateau and looped back to his open palm without a single wasted motion. You are integrating faster than I have ever witnessed, Isamu admitted, genuine wonder threading through his usually measured voice. At this rate, within a matter of weeks, not months, you may achieve full binding capacity, enough to restrain something considerably larger and more dangerous than a training exercise. Like what? Naruto asked, curious despite the exhaustion beginning to pull at his limbs again. Isamu hesitated, weighing something behind his dark eyes. Your mother's greatest achievement with this technique, he said finally, was binding a tailed beast. Not permanently, no chain, however powerful, holds something of that magnitude forever. But long enough. Long enough to save lives that would otherwise have been lost. He studied Naruto carefully. You already carry one within you, do you not? A more intimate bond with the concept of tailed beasts than perhaps any Uzumaki before you, even your mother. Naruto's hand drifted unconsciously to his stomach, where the familiar warmth of Kurama's chakra still pulsed steady beneath the seal. Kurama's not something I'd ever want to bind, though. Not anymore. We're actually friends now. Have been for a while. I did not mean it as a threat to be neutralized, Isamu clarified gently. I meant it as a demonstration of how deeply this technique might one day serve you, not merely as a weapon against an enemy, but as a tool of protection, precisely calibrated to the scale of whatever danger you face. There may come a day, in this fractured world of ours, when you need to bind something far more hostile than the friend sealed inside you. When that day comes, I want you ready. Naruto nodded slowly, the weight of that settling over him, not fear, exactly, but a quiet, steady sense of purpose, the same feeling that had carried him through every impossible fight before this one. Then let's keep going, he said. I want to be ready. They trained until the light began to slant gold and low across the plateau, shadows stretching long across scorched and smooth stone alike, and by the time Isamu finally called an end to the day's lesson, Naruto could summon a full, coordinated web of 8 chains at once, still short, by a wide margin, of the technique's true potential, but leagues beyond where he'd started that morning, and further than Isamu had genuinely expected any student to travel in a single day. Enough, Isamu said, watching Naruto sway slightly on his feet, chakra reserves finally beginning to genuinely strain despite Kurama's vast well backing him up. You have done more today than I anticipated for the entire first week. Rest. Eat properly. Let your body recover, or tomorrow's progress will suffer for it. Yes, sensei, Naruto said, and then blinked, startled at his own automatic use of the word, something warm and strange settling into his chest at how naturally it had slipped out. Isamu's expression softened at that, something unspoken passing behind his dark eyes. "It has been a very long time," he said quietly, "since anyone called me that. I find, rather to my own surprise, that I do not mind hearing it again." They walked back down toward the settlement together as the sky deepened into evening, and it was there, near the edge of the guest house, that Naruto felt it again, that same warm, golden pulse from the seal on his stomach, the same impossible, aching recognition that had woken him in the dead of night 2 evenings before. He turned, and there she was. Kushina stood a short distance away, translucent and faintly glowing in the deepening dusk, her wild red hair catching light that shouldn't have been able to touch something so insubstantial. Her eyes, his own eyes, he understood now, entirely his own eyes, fixed on him with an expression of such total, overwhelming love that his breath caught painfully in his throat. "Mom?" he whispered, hardly daring to believe it, hardly daring to move in case the vision shattered the moment he did. She didn't speak. Whatever fragment of chakra memory this was, it seemed capable of presence, of expression, but not of words, not fully, not yet. But she smiled at him, achingly gentle, and raised one translucent hand toward him, as if reaching across 17 years and an impossible distance all at once. Naruto reached back, knowing even as he did that his fingers would pass through nothing but empty air, and they did, the vision offering no solid warmth to hold on to, no real embrace to answer 17 years of aching absence. But for one long, suspended moment, standing there in the golden dusk light with his hand outstretched toward the ghost of a mother he'd never gotten the chance to know, it didn't matter that she wasn't solid. It only mattered that she was there, watching him, proud of him, loving him across whatever impossible distance separated the living from whatever fragment of her remained bound into his own skin. Then, slowly, gently, the vision faded, dissolving back into the ordinary dusk, and Naruto stood alone on the walkway, tears streaking silently down his face, his chest aching with a grief that had, for the very first time, begun to feel less like an absence, and more like something he had actually, truly been allowed to hold. Behind him, Isamu had gone very still, watching the entire exchange with an expression of profound, careful reverence. "You saw her again," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Naruto nodded, wiping at his eyes, unable to fully explain the tangled, overwhelming feeling in his chest even to himself. "Yeah." She didn't say anything. She just looked at me. Like she was proud. "She likely is," Isamu said gently. "Whatever fragment of her chakra memory this land is allowing you to glimpse, I do not believe it is capable of deception, Naruto. Whatever you feel in that presence, that is likely as true and unfiltered as anything you will ever know of her." Naruto looked back toward the empty space where she'd stood, something settling into place in his chest that had been unmoored and adrift for as long as he could remember. "I want to learn everything," he said quietly. "Everything you can teach me. Not just the chains. Everything about her. About all of you. I want to actually understand what I lost when Uzumaki fell, instead of just an absence with her name on it." "Then you shall," Isamu said, and there was something like a promise in the words. "This clan owes Kushina's memory that much, at the very least. And I suspect, watching you today, that we owe her son considerably more than that." That night back at the guest house, Naruto told the others everything, the single threads of chain, the full 8 chain weave by day's end, the story of his mother's love for ramen and her furious, protective temper, and finally, quietly, the vision on the walkway at dusk. Sakura listened with tears in her own eyes by the end of it, reaching over to squeeze his hand tightly. "I'm so happy for you, Naruto. Really. You deserve to know all of this." Sasuke, leaning against the wall near the fire, said nothing for a long moment, his dark eyes distant, turned inward on something private. Then, quietly, "My mother used to make onigiri on days I trained particularly hard. I haven't thought about that in years." He glanced at Naruto, something rare and unguarded passing across his usually shuttered expression. "It's strange, being somewhere that makes you remember things like that. I think it's good though, even when it hurts." Kakashi, watching his students with the quiet, worn warmth of a man who had buried more people than any of them yet understood, allowed himself a small, genuine smile beneath his mask. Your mother would be proud of the man you're becoming, Naruto, he said. I never got the chance to know her personally. I was only a child myself when Uzumaki fell. But I knew your father well, and I know, without a shred of doubt, that everything he loved about her, he saw reflected back in you the moment you were born. That's not nothing. That's everything. Naruto ducked his head, overwhelmed all over again, but smiling now through it, something in his chest finally, gently, beginning to heal. Outside, high above the hidden basin, the stars had come out in full, and somewhere in the quiet dark beyond the cliffs, the wider world went on turning. A world that had cast Team 7 out without a second thought, and had no idea, not yet, exactly what kind of shinobi it was about to lose the chance to call its own. But that world was about to come looking. Because word travels, even in shadow, and somewhere back in Konoha, a man with a bandaged arm and a single visible eye had already begun to notice that four exiled shinobi had vanished a great deal more thoroughly than any ordinary fugitives should have been able to manage.